Hi guys, it's me, ChazzaHD, and welcome to the final day of the 2025 Formula One season. Race day in Abu Dhabi, and still a championship to be decided. The Drivers' Championship has been, obviously, the battle been going all season. At times, it looked like we had a pretty clear winner a few months ago. Then, obviously, it changed around with Oscar Piastri losing the lead to Lando Norris. And then it looked pretty certain that Lando Norris was going to be the champion. But after a big turnaround in these last couple races, we now come to the final race day with three drivers left in the battle. Lando Norris, Max Verstappen, and Oscar Piastri. And today, we will crown a world champion, but who will it be? Will Lando Norris take his first world championship and Britain's first, become Britain's first drivers' champion since Lewis Hamilton in 2020? Will Oscar Piastri take his first championship and become Australia's first Formula One world champion since Alan Jones all the way back in 1980, I believe? 45 years ago? Or will Max Verstappen, revered by many as the best in Formula One, will he take his fifth consecutive championship, which would be, for him, he would be the second driver only in history to have won 5 consecutive world championships? Will that happen today? Will Norris take his first title? Will Piastri take his first title? We will find out over the next 3 to 4 hours in this Abu Dhabi Grand Prix. As you can see, top right of your screen, the Grand Prix starts in just under 2 hours from now. Cannot wait to get into this title-deciding race. I'll be honest, I don't think the race today is going to be a classic. We have to remember the circuit we're racing at is not a great track for racing, just historically speaking. And there is a big chance that this race could be a giant anticlimax, given that Lando Norris is still firmly in control of his own destiny, obviously as the championship leader, going into this race 12 points clear of Max Verstappen, his nearest rival. But I think we will get a bit of drama today, even if that's just Max Verstappen holding up the whole field to try and force somebody to take on and beat the McLarens. We will get something happening in the Grand Prix, and whether it leads to a turnaround in the championship for Verstappen or Piastri, or in the end just leads to a pretty comfortable championship victory for Lando Norris, we will find out. Hello to you guys, hope you're all doing well, and hello again if you joined me yesterday, or if you've only joined me for the first time today. Hello to all of you, hope you're all doing well, and no matter what time zone you're in, what part of the world you're from, I hope you'll all be joining me and my co-commentator Niblo, who will be joining us in about an hour and a half. I hope you'll be joining us today in enjoying and watching along the final Grand Prix of 2025, and obviously witnessing who wins the championship for 2025. So yeah, cannot wait to get into it, and obviously we've got plenty of stuff to go through before we get into the race itself. I'll go on to that in a moment. There is a poll I just want to quickly plug. There is a poll running at the top of the live chat as usual. Instead, though, of me asking you guys who will win the race, I've asked an even more important question. Who will win the Drivers' Championship today? Will it be Lando Norris, Max Verstappen, or Oscar Piastri winning the championship today? Let me know in the live chat in that poll. And that poll will keep running until about 5 minutes or so before the race starts. We'll see who you voted for, and then we'll see if you guys end up being correct with your votes in the Grand Prix itself. But yeah, make sure to vote in that poll and we'll see who you all vote for. And if you are new to what we do here on the watch-alongs, maybe this is the first time you've ever joined us, obviously on this crucial day in the Formula One season, what we're going to do is build up to the race by looking at really the data from the weekend so far, looking at obviously the results of qualifying and what our starting grid is. We'll go through the sector time data from qualifying to understand why certain teams are quick, why certain teams are not. And we'll also get into the speed trap data just to have a look at, what teams to keep an eye on. Because, of course, we have 2 long DRS straights at this circuit. So, we'll have a look to see who's pretty quick down the long straights and who is suffering a bit. And also, we'll look at the long run data from practice 2 on Friday just to see on the longer runs who is looking strong and who is not. And then, of course, I'll give my own predictions for the race. We will also go through what the predicted strategy is for today. Pirelli, of course, normally give out that information a few hours before the race, and I've seen already what they're saying is the predicted best strategy for the race today. And we will go through that and what all the strategy options are for this Grand Prix and what, team could do what and how things, could play out differently through the strategic avenue of the race. And then, we'll bring, like I said, my co-commentator Niblo on in about an hour and 20 minutes or so. But very importantly, I want to hear, before we get to the race, I want to hear from you guys in the live chat. Let me know, what do you think will happen in this Grand Prix? Who do you think is going to win the race? Who do you think will finish on the podium? But most importantly, whether you cast your vote in the poll or you just let me know via putting a message in the chat. What do you think happens today, and who do you think wins the World Championship? So let me know in the chat, and we'll see what you guys have to say. And we will get onto your comments soon enough. But before we go into the results of qualifying and what the grid is, let's get into the championship permutations. I will make sure to go through this right before the race as well. So don't worry if you don't quite catch everything I go through here. I will go through it again right before the race begins. But here are the championship permutations. So for Lando Norris in the middle there, he must finish at least 3rd in this race, regardless of what Max and Oscar do. If Lando finishes at least 3rd, he is the world champion. End of story. But for Max Verstappen, he must outscore Lando by 12 points if he wins the race. The reason that is because if they ended up level on points, but Max won the race, then Max would win the championship on countback of having more victories. But of course, if Max does win, then it's impossible for him to outscore Lando by 12 points exactly, because he could either only outscore Lando by either 10 or 13 points. So, essentially for Max, realistically, what he needs is to win the race and for Lando to not finish on the podium. That is as simple as I can put it. And if that does happen, Max Verstappen will be the 5-time world champion and must outscore Lando regardless by 13 points, whether he wins the race or not. So, for example, if Max Verstappen finishes 3rd, then Lando needs to be 9th or lower for Max to be champion. If Max finishes 2nd, Lando needs to be 8th or lower for Max to be champion. For Piastri, he must outscore Lando Norris by 16 points if he wins the race. Again, though, that is not, with the point system we've got, is not possible because Piastri, or because, the way the point system works from 1st place down to 10th, Piastri, if Piastri ends up level on points with Lando Norris, of course it would first go to count back on victories, and if Oscar was to win the race, of course Oscar would win that. But if they're level on points at the end of the Grand Prix and Oscar hasn't won the race, which again it can't happen that way, it would go back to count back on second place finishes. Oscar, though, even if he outscores Lando by 17 points, which is what he needs to do to get ahead of Norris in the championship, he must also outscore Verstappen by 5 points. But really, for Verstappen and Piastri, they know how many points they need to outscore Lando by. But really, it is pretty simple from the championship leader's perspective. As long as Lando Norris finishes on the podium, he is the champion. But if he's not on the podium, that's when things get interesting. Because let's say he finishes 4th, then Max needs to win the championship. But if Lando finishes 4th and Max doesn't win, then Lando could still obviously win the championship. So, again, it depends really all on Lando Norris. Again, as long as he finishes on the podium, he is the champion, even if Verstappen or Piastri win the race. So those are basically the permutations, the key permutations for this championship battle. And yeah, it is all down to Lando Norris in terms of having or getting the championship won. But again, if he doesn't get on the podium, then it opens up the door to the other two. But let's get on to the results of qualifying. And thankfully, the top 3 in the championship are in the top 3 grid positions. Not, though, in championship order. Max Verstappen, who is 2nd in the championship, is on pole for this Abu Dhabi Grand Prix. He is only 0.2 of a second ahead of the 2 McLarens. Very, very good pole position by Max. I do think, though, McLaren could have done better in qualifying, because the best time they ended up doing was a 1:22.4. Piastri in Q1 did a 1:22.6, so I do think McLaren could have found more time on track in qualifying, but the 2 drivers just didn't do anywhere near as good of a job as Max did at the end of qualifying. And that's why Verstappen is on pole and is in the perfect position for him to do the best job he can to turn around the championship in his favour. Lando Norris, though, even though Lando's not on pole, which obviously would be the perfect position to start from, he's still in a really good position because he's in between his 2 championship rivals. And Piastri, he has been Lando has been quicker than Oscar pretty much the entire weekend by a 10th or 2 per lap. So if that continues in that way in the race and Lando gets away in 2nd place, then Lando, even if Max tries to hold Lando up and back the whole field up to try and close up, the Russell and Leclerc and drivers like that to the McLarens to try and give them a chance to maybe get past the McLarens, Lando should have the pace to comfortably stay with Max, but also be comfortably ahead of Oscar. So it is going to take something really going wrong for Lando today for him to not win the championship. Like what we saw in Qatar, if McLaren make a big mistake on the strategy, or there's a big reliability issue, or of course, if at turn 1 Lando gets hit by someone, then that will turn it around for Verstappen or Piastri in their favour and be the big blow that Norris does not need in this final race. But if those things don't happen, then Lando Norris really should win the championship today, because the car is fast enough. He, in that car, is fast enough to finish on the podium. And yeah, it's going to take, I think, I won't say a miracle, but it's going to take a lot to really go wrong for him today to not get the championship won. So yeah, top 3 in the championship, the 3 title contenders all in the top 3, which is, yeah, perfect scenario, really. And I got to say, I was quite surprised it ended up that way, because Russell in the Mercedes was looking really quick in qualifying up until Q3, and I thought it was going to be a real factor in, what happened in Q3 in terms of the top 3 positions, but really fell away quite badly and is in 4th place. Russell really, and I think even after qualifying, I heard him quite disappointed, because I think he knows, Russell, even though the top 3 obviously are not going to be taking massive risks necessarily today in their hunt for the championship, for Russell and Mercedes, if they were going to win this Grand Prix, they really needed to maximize qualifying, and they didn't do that. They could have been top 3 or even on the front row of the grid for this race if they'd maximized, I think, the potential of their car in Q3, but they failed to do so, and they're 4th on the grid. And in terms of race pace, Mercedes, I don't think, have the pace to be in the top 3, as long as the top 3 have a simple enough Grand Prix. So, yeah, it's going to take something either quite special by George Russell, or he'll have to get a bit lucky to be on the podium in this final Grand Prix, because the Mercedes just isn't quick enough, unfortunately, over a race distance, given the makeup of the grid. Charles Leclerc 5th. Leclerc, I have to say, doing a great job, because that Ferrari car is still a midfield car, really. It's better than it was in Qatar, obviously, but it is still midfield cannon fodder, really. And he is 5th on the grid. Very good position. He got the best out of the car, no doubt about that. You cannot deny that. There's no way that I think anyone else really could have dragged more out of that Ferrari in terms of position. 5th is the best he could have done, and 5th is what he's got. And if he can finish in P5, I think Leclerc would be satisfied with that for this final race. But Ferrari are not going to have an easy day, because the cars behind, Aston Martin, Sauber, Haas, they all look pretty strong, and they're not going to be too far behind the Ferrari of Leclerc. And then you got Alonso in 6th. Great effort from Alonso, just nipping ahead of the driver he manages, Gabriel Bortoleto. And then Esteban Ocon, very rare, good qualifying. Something he's not really had in not just the last year, but the last 2 years. Esteban Ocon, 8th on the grid. Keep an eye on him today. 9th, Isaac Hadjar, once again making Q3 in his final race for now for Racing Bulls. And Yuki Tsunoda did not manage to do a time, because he had his lap time deleted at the end of Q3. But I think another thing that favours Lando Norris, the championship leader, is that you've got Antonelli and Hamilton in supposedly front-running cars way outside of the top 10, so they're not a factor in this race in terms of, they won't be able to seriously affect Lando or McLaren's race, because by the time we get to the first pit window, Lewis Hamilton definitely, and probably Antonelli, will be outside of their pit window. So, yeah. That does help also Norris, that, at the end of the day, all he's got to worry about is Russell and Leclerc, really, in this race. I just, got to make sure he finishes ahead of those two, at least, and he will surely be champion. The rest of the field, Oliver Behrman 11th. Disappointing from Behrman, because I think he had the pace to be not only in the top 10, I think he could have been 6th or 7th on the grid. He's been very quick this weekend, so watch out for him in the race. I think he's definitely going to get into the points. Sainz 12th, Williams just not quick in qualifying. Lawson 13th, Antonelli 14th. Antonelli was terrible, I thought. in qualifying. Stroll 15th, and then Lewis Hamilton in 16th, Albon 17th, Hulkenberg 18th, and the two Alpines on the back row of the grid. Lewis Hamilton also absolutely terrible in qualifying. Hamilton, even though the Ferrari is still not good, Hamilton still should have made the top 10 and should have been probably 8th or 9th on the grid at worst, but 16th he is. And he only missed out on Q2 by 8 thousandths of a second, I think it was, but still very, very poor. But that is your grid for this Grand Prix. But let's get into the sector time data just to understand why the pecking order is the way it is, and why certain teams are quick, why certain teams are not. And for Red Bull, really, the reason they got pole was because of the first two sectors and being just so quick in the just high-speed parts of the track, in terms of not just those high-speed flat-out corners, but down the straights mainly as well. Half a tenth quicker than they were the McLaren and Mercedes in the first sector. The first sector obviously is flat out except for the first corner, so it's a pretty simple part of the lap. Ferrari only 7th quickest in the first sector. That just shows you how good of a lap Leclerc did, despite the lack of pace from the Ferrari car. And then the middle sector, again, Red Bull very quick. They were almost 0.2 of a second quicker than McLaren in this part of the lap. 10th quicker than Ferrari, who were a lot better in the middle sector. And the midfield looking very close, from Williams in 5th down to Alpine even last. So the middle sector, again, not really that important in terms of showing the pace of the cars. The only thing this really shows is who has good straight line speed around the circuit. And yeah, Red Bull, like I said, that's really why they got pole, because they were able to be so quick in the first couple sectors. The final sector, where it matters most in qualifying, McLaren, no surprise, were the fastest team, but Red Bull, what they were able to do compared to what they were doing in practice too, was they were able to close the gap enough to where they were still comfortably able to get pole position. Because in practice too, Max Verstappen was 0.3 of a second slower than McLaren in the final sector. But then in qualifying, it was only half a tenth. So that really helped as well keep the margin at a healthy 0.2 of a second for Max and Red Bull. But through the corners, again, I don't think there's any doubt that McLaren have got the fastest car. But this circuit is mostly flat out. It's a pretty high-speed circuit at this point. So, yeah, McLaren, it will come back to McLaren a bit more in the race today, because, of course, the corners become even more important in the race, because you can't take the corners as quickly and as flat in the race as you can in qualifying. So it will be, it will come a bit more towards McLaren in the race. And I do expect McLaren in clear air to have the fastest car in the race today. But whether they can actually utilize that to win is a different story, because Max Verstappen out front, passing him and beating him is a completely different story. I've got to say, though, Mercedes, quite surprised how far off they were in the final sector. And that's really why they were just not able to compete with Max, Lando, and Oscar in the final part of qualifying, because they had nowhere near enough pace in the final sector. 0.2 slower than Red Bull and 1/4 of a second slower than McLaren. If they were a couple tenths of a second quicker in the final sector, I think Russell could have snatched 3rd place, but they just weren't, like I said, they just weren't quick enough to be in that part of the grid, unfortunately. And we're only just ahead, very impressively, of the Haas of Ocon, the Sauber of Bortoleto with an Aston Martin. Ferrari, again, not doing great in the final sector, but that's to be expected. We've seen that car snapping all over the place this weekend. Quite a big drop-off, I've got to say, to Williams. Half a second off the pace of McLaren and, 3/10 off the pace of Haas even, just in this final sector. So Williams really struggling in the final part of the lap, which was always going to be the weakest part of the lap for them. But yeah, not doing great there, Williams, or obviously Alpine. But in terms of the fight between McLaren and Red Bull, like I said, in the first two sectors, Red Bull have the better car, but in the final sector, McLaren are, I think, pretty comfortably the fastest team. But, of course, in the final sector, you can't overtake. So that's ultimately what matters, and that's why track position, whoever has the lead at the end of the first lap, will hold the keys to winning this race, because it is easier to overtake at this track than it was before with the old layout. Thank God we don't have that old layout anymore. Yeah, it's easier to overtake, but it is still, you still have to have a much faster car than your rival if you're going to overtake on circuit, even with DRS. So yeah, it is, from Max Verstappen's point of view, as long as he gets away in the lead, then he should be able to control the pace and avoid at the same time getting overtaken. So he should be comfortable enough. Overall, though, what is the pecking order going into this race? I would say, by the way, hello to Francisco in the chat. I haven't seen you in a while. Yeah, good to see you for the first time in a bit. And good to see everyone in the chat. By the way, not just Francisco, but yeah, good to see you especially. Yeah, the pecking order for this race, in terms of race pace, Red Bull and McLaren, I think, are going to be on pretty much the same pace. Again, if Max is in the lead, he's probably going to back up the McLarens to try and bring Russell and Leclerc into play. But if F1 ran a totally fair race where they pushed as hard as they could, then, like I said, Red Bull and McLaren should be on the same pace. Mercedes will be third quickest, and then fourth quickest will probably be Ferrari, but only just ahead of Aston Martin. And then, honestly, I think Haas probably have the faster car than Sauber, and maybe even Aston Martin. But the only issue for Haas is they don't have the advantage necessarily in terms of grid position. So that will make things a bit harder for the Haas team. But keep an eye on Haas, because, again, they should have a pretty quick car in the race. Racing Bulls, I'm not expecting to be very quick. They don't tend to be amazingly quick on race day a lot of the time. And then after that, you got Williams, and then Alpine obviously will be the slowest team. The midfield is going to be very, very close between, like I said, Aston Martin, Sauber, Haas, Racing Bulls, Williams. So it should be a really good fight between those teams. But obviously, what we're mainly focusing on is the fight up front. And like I said, the pace between the Red Bull and McLaren, it should be about equal. So the start of this race is obviously very, very important. Let's get on to, though, the speed trap data. And the reason I want to get onto this is because, obviously, overtaking is not a extremely common thing at this circuit. But if you do have a bit extra speed down the straights compared to maybe certain teams, you definitely can get the job done. And Red Bull, the quickest in the speed trap. This speed trap data, by the way, is from the speed trap located at the end of the first long back straight, where we have the first DRS zone. That's the straight going into the turn 6 and turn 7 chicane. And yeah, 332 kilometers an hour for Red Bull. The fastest in a straight line, but as you can see, compared to Ferrari, Mercedes, and even McLaren, they're not massively quicker. I mean, compared to McLaren, there's a 3 kilometer an hour difference, which is, a bit, in Formula One terms, that is still, a good amount, but it's not a massive amount to where if Red Bull get within a second of a McLaren, they're going to be able to easily overtake down the straights. So it is still pretty close between all of the teams. One thing to remark on is just how slow, for some reason, Williams are down the straights this weekend, which doesn't make any sense because normally they're pretty quick down the straights. They're usually in the top 5 at pretty much every, pretty much every session. And also this weekend, they've been struggling through some of those corners in the final sector. You'd think to combat that, they would put some more downforce on to be quicker through that part of the lap. But if you go look at the Sector 2 time they did, it was one of the worst out of the entire field. So maybe they did put extra downforce on to be quicker in that part of the lap, but they just failed anyways. I'm not sure. But yeah, I'm a bit baffled as to why Williams have the slowest top speed of any of the teams. The one thing we need to quickly mention, as this is the final race, not only of 2025, but of the ground effect era. Good riddance, I must say, to the ground effect cars. They've been an absolute failure. Also, goodbye to DRS, drag reduction system. This Grand Prix today, this will be the final Grand Prix possibly ever of the drag reduction system, because next year we will have active aero, meaning that drivers will be able to adjust their aero in the car to, obviously, if they're trying to overtake, they'll try and cut a bit of front downforce to make them a bit more slippery in a straight line. But also, they're going to, next year, with the cars they've got next year, instead of using DRS, they're also going to have basically a push to pass button where they're going to use the electrical boost from the engine to basically serve as the replacement for DRS. So, yeah, next year we won't see any, rear wing opening, DRS type stuff. And yeah, this is the final time, possibly ever, that we will see DRS in Formula One. And a lot of people will be happy. I think I'm relatively happy that it is going, because I don't think it's necessarily worked a lot of the time. I think there's been years where, DRS, they got it absolutely right with the type of cars we had. There's been years, though, where it was way too powerful. Lately, with this ground effect era, I'd say it was probably not powerful enough. So, yeah, it's had its hits, it's had its misses, but yeah, DRS saying goodbye after this Grand Prix. And whether the replacement for it will work, who knows? Who knows? We'll have to see how well the cars follow next year and how effective pushing or utilizing their electrical boost will be with those cars next year. I think it might be a bit more... it'll be a bit more effective with certain teams than others, put it that way. Especially the teams that, or the manufacturers that get their engines right, or more so right from the off. So, yeah. We'll see what happens with that in the race. And, yeah, we'll see who ends up being the final DRS overtake of the DRS era. The first ever DRS overtake was, I'm pretty sure it was Fernando Alonso on Nico Rosberg. Nico Rosberg currently on the Sky F1 coverage. It would be funny if Alonso was the last to complete an overtake with DRS. So we'll see whether that actually does happen. Anyway, let me go on to the race pace data and the long run data from practice 2. Now, with Isaac Hadjar, the average time he was doing of 1:27.9, You can ignore that because he clearly was running with a bit less fuel and he did that run on the soft compound tyres. So clearly he was pushing a lot harder than others. But the rest of the field, I think we can look at and take note of. Hulkenberg in the Sauber did his long run on the hard compound tyre, which I think is the best race tyre for today. So if you, say, drop half a second in terms of adjusting the tyres from Hulkenberg there, then Sauber looked like they're pretty much in the middle of the pack with their race pace. Norris did his long run on the medium. Max did his long run on the medium as well. Ocon did his long run on the soft compound tyre and was still on the same pace as Red Bull. So very impressive, considering the soft should be the worst of the three tyres of the race today. Same for Sainz. He also did his long run on the soft. Antonelli did his on the medium. Leclerc on the medium. Alonso did his on the medium. And Colapinto did his long run on the hard compound tyres. So watch out for Ocon and the Haas and Williams, because they potentially might have quite a bit of race pace today. But normally, if you look at the races this season, McLaren tend to be the fastest team in the race, and then it tends to be Red Bull second, Mercedes third, Ferrari fourth. Occasionally, Williams will be fourth or even third. Depends really on their grid position, though, with them. Aston Martin tend to have a slight drop-off compared to qualifying. Racing Bulls tend to drop off a bit compared to qualifying. Sauber and Haas, though, tend to be as quick, relatively, compared to the rest of the field, if not slightly quicker in the race compared to what they have done in qualifying. So that's normally, how it tends to go with those teams. So ultimately, we'll see where, all the teams are at in the race. But like I said, with the pecking order, I think it's probably going to be McLaren quickest, slightly quicker than Red Bull, and then Mercedes third, Ferrari fourth, and then probably Aston Martin fifth, Haas sixth, Sauber seventh, Williams eighth, Racing Bulls ninth, Sauber, and then Alpine in 10th. That's probably what the pecking order will be for this race in terms of the race pace and clear air. But let me now get on to my final prediction of the season, and it is the prediction for this race. I've also gone for the predicted gaps, and I will explain, in terms of the gaps, why I think it will end up the way I've predicted. And Max Verstappen, I do think, will win the race today by only a second from Lando Norris. Oscar Piastri will be right behind Norris in third. And then George Russell in fourth, I think, will end up 20 seconds behind. Leclerc then in fifth will be a few seconds back. And then we'll have quite a train of cars behind him of Alonso, Bortoleto, Ocon, Behrman and Sainz, who I think will round out the rest of the field. With Verstappen, I think he will back up the field for probably the first 20, maybe 25 laps. But I think after the pit stop phase is over, and there should only be one pit stop today, if Norris and Piastri are still comfortably second and third, then I think Verstappen will probably pick up his pace and just try to secure the win. That's why I think Russell in fourth will probably end up dropping about 20 seconds behind in the end. So, yeah, that's what I think is going to happen. Max is definitely going to play some games. He is going to back up the McLarens, probably early on. But like I said, I think it won't end up working. They'll go through the pit stop phase. Max will still be in the lead, and then he'll probably just decide to make sure he secures the win and just hope that Lando, that something happens to him. That's what I think will happen. If it does finish this way, though, Lando Norris will be the driver's champion and will win it by 5 points over Verstappen. Piastri in third would end up being, 19 points behind in third if it was to end this way. And ultimately, we will see if it does end up this way. Let me just come back to the screen and I'll just get the timer back on screen as we're now going to go through race strategy for this race, because of course that is very important for this Grand Prix. So make sure to keep your comments coming in the chat, as I will get to the best ones I can over this build-up, and I will be coming to you guys pretty soon. So keep your comments coming. Let me know what you think is going to happen today. Will we get an exciting title decider? Who do you think is going to win the championship? All of that, let me know in the live chat. As there you go. Pretty much hour and 20 minutes to go until the race starts in Abu Dhabi. But yeah, we are just going to quickly go through race strategy, and it is pretty simple. Pirelli have said that the best strategy for today is to do a one-stop race. And according to Pirelli, the fastest way to do that is start on the medium, pit between lap 20 and 26, and then finish the race on a set of hard tyres. That is the very basic one-stop strategy that I think most people are going to do. The tyres just don't really wear out, enough really for it to be a two-stop race unless we get like a safety car midway through or something like that. So, yeah, that is a very basic strategy that is going to happen today. There are other strategy options, though. The other one-stop option is to start on the hard tyre, pit between lap 39 and 45, and then finish the race on a set of soft tyres to just go absolutely crazy at the end. We've seen drivers do that before. There are, though, 3 two-stop options if drivers want to do a two-stop race. You could pit between lap 15 and 21 after starting on the mediums, then go on to a set of hard tyres, then pit again between lap 37 and 43 to finish the race on a set of mediums. Or you could start the race with the mediums, pit a bit earlier between lap 11 and 17, go on to a set of hard tyres, pit again between lap 34 and 40 for another set of hard tyres to finish the race. And the third two-stop option is to start on the mediums, pit between lap 17 and 23, then go on to a set of hard tyres, pit again between lap 40 and 46, and then finish the race on a set of soft tyres. Remember, of course, it is a 58-lap race. Sorry, I was just clearing my throat there. So yeah, pretty simply, it is going to be a one-stop race. Unless we get a safety car, say, between lap 25 and 50, or lap 25 and 52, or something like that. If that doesn't happen, then yeah, we will get a one-stop race today. In terms of the championship contenders up front, for Max Verstappen, if he does decide to back up the McLarens in the first stint, he's got to be very careful, because if he does that, then McLaren could just very simply wait until the pit window opens and then do an undercut and then get past Verstappen that way. And if they do, then McLaren will very likely then go on to win the race, because they get ahead. I just don't see Red Bull having enough pace to then get back ahead unless they turn their engine settings up and just blow the engine to bits trying to get past. So, yeah, for Verstappen, again, he's got to be careful with, if he does that backing up thing, he's got to be careful as to when he does it, how he does it. Maybe he only does it after the first and only run a pit stops so that McLaren can't do an undercut. That is possible. And that is actually what Lewis Hamilton did in 2016, is after all of the pit stops were finished, Hamilton then decided to back up Rosberg into the path of Vettel and Verstappen. And I think also Ricciardo maybe as well. So that would be the smartest thing to do, is wait until after the pit stops are done and then back up the McLarens and then just hope somehow that Lando doesn't finish on the podium. But I mean, in terms of the pit stop itself, as Pirelli said, if you start on the medium, pit between lap 20 and 26. I think with Max, if he's in the lead, I think all he's going to do is just cover off the McLarens behind just to make sure he maintains the lead, and then probably will then back up the McLarens into the cars behind, or Lando into the cars behind. If Max though does lose the lead at the start, which obviously we saw that in the last title decider here in Abu Dhabi in 2021, he lost the lead into the first corner, then quite simply the only thing they can do is with Verstappen is stay close enough to whoever's in the lead and do the undercut when they get to the pit window. And if they can and get ahead, then great. So that is, it's a pretty simple race, I would say, strategy-wise from Red Bull. And then in terms of what Max does behind the wheel to hurt the McLarens, we'll have to see when we get into the race itself as to what he decides to do at certain points. For the two McLarens, a lot does depend on the start. If Lando Norris, for example, gets into the lead on the first lap, then pretty simply, McLaren are going to try and push, I think, quite hard in that first stint, because not only will they want to pull away from Max Verstappen, they'll want to pull away to the point where Max not only can't undercut them, but cannot play any games with Lando to affect where Lando is on track compared to the cars behind. So if Lando does get into the lead, expect him to really push hard in that first stint to build a lead, especially, and build a gap to the midfield so that when he does pit, his pit window is relatively clear of troublesome cars, let's say. So, yeah, I think that's what they'll do if he gets into the lead. If they're second and third, though, in that first stint, then the only thing they can do is just push after Max. If Max is trying to back them up, then the only thing they can do in response is just try to overtake Verstappen to combat that. But if they can't, then the only thing they can try is to do an undercut on Verstappen. The only risk, though, if they go for an undercut on Verstappen, if Max has backed up the pack to the very back of the field, is, of course, that then means that McLaren will drop out or drop back into a lot of traffic that they'll have to then make their way through. That'll give Verstappen then an advantage in terms of Max, probably having to pit a few laps later and still maintain position on fresher tyres. So they've got to be careful with how they pull that undercut off if they decide to go for it. McLaren normally go for an overcut rather than an undercut, so they might decide to go the overcut route instead. But in terms of strategy for the three title contenders, I think it's just going to be pretty much all plan A, which is pit around lap 20, 21, 22, go from the medium to the hard tyre, and then finish the race. I think the only thing really to look at, which is going to be interesting, is, will Max back Lando and the McLarens up into the rest of the pack? And if he does, when will he do it, and how long will he do it for? I think that's really the interesting thing to look at, because in terms of when McLaren or when Red Bull pit, as long as they pit around lap 20, then they've ticked that box in terms of getting the strategy right for the race. With Mercedes and Ferrari, it's going to be interesting, because if Max does back up the pack in the first stint, obviously that will keep Russell and Leclerc a lot more within sight of not just Verstappen but the two McLarens a lot more than it would have. If the race was normal today, then Mercedes and Ferrari would be nowhere near in the fight for a podium today. But because Max needs to back up Lando into the pack to have a bit of a chance of hurting Lando's race, to win the championship, it creates a chance for Mercedes and Ferrari to possibly get their way somehow onto the podium. Even though, like I said, in clear air, when everyone's pushing at their hardest, Mercedes and Ferrari are not even close. I think this weekend in race conditions to the pace of the Red Bull or the McLaren. So it all depends on what Max does out front, if he is out front. If Lando gets out front on the first lap, that is the worst possible scenario for Mercedes and Ferrari. Because if Lando gets out front, and let's say Lando pits on lap 20, by the time we get to lap 20, Russell will probably be at least 10 seconds off the lead, which would, is what, just under half a pit stop. And then for Leclerc, he's probably going to be, what, nearly a pit stop behind, probably like 16, 17 seconds behind, if Norris or Piastri are, the leader of the race. So that's what Mercedes and Ferrari need the most. It's Max to maintain the lead and back up the pack as much as possible. And then that is their chance to somehow maneuver themselves onto the podium. But if McLaren get into the lead on the first lap, then by the time we get to the first round of pit stops, they'll be way too far away to be able to get not even on the podium, but anywhere near the podium in this race today. So really, strategy doesn't really matter that much today. Again, it really comes down to the driver tactics of Max Verstappen in terms of what he does out front, if he is out front in the race today. That's what it really comes down to. But who knows what he has planned? Maybe he will try exactly what Lewis Hamilton did in 2016. Maybe he'll try something different. Maybe he'll try the same thing as Hamilton, but do it for longer. We don't know. We'll have to wait and see. But strategy-wise, it should be a pretty simple race for pretty much all the teams. The tyres are not really wearing out that much. And it should be pretty easy if you start the medium tyre to go 20, maybe even 25 laps before you make your pit stop. So, yeah, relatively simple race it should be on the strategy. But those are your strategy options for the race today, as we've got just over an hour to go until the race begins in Abu Dhabi. By the way, good to see Rooks in the chat for this final race. And good to see so many of you in the chat as well. Make sure, by the way, for everyone watching, to smash a like button. We're currently on 24 likes. Let's try and get to 40 plus likes if we can in the next half an hour. That'd be great if we could do that. And also make sure to subscribe for more content like this, as we've got plenty of winter break content coming your way, which I am going to announce what those videos will be in a moment. And make sure to subscribe also, because we'll be doing plenty of watch-alongs next year for 2026. And it would be a pleasure for you to join us for a complete new era in 2026. Who knows who will be fighting for the championship next year and who will be the world champion? And that's the beauty of a new set of regulations. A new era could be a totally new set of drivers winning and fighting for the championship. So yeah, make sure to subscribe for more content like this. So yeah, before I come to your comments in the chat, I am just going to quickly have a quick sip on my drink just to get my throat in decent condition. And then I'm just going to do a quick channel update for you guys, and then we'll get into your comments in the chat. So keep your comments coming, and I'll get to them very soon. Right, so yeah, there you go. That should be a bit better. But yeah, before we come to your comments, I just want to do a quick channel update because, of course, today is the final day of the season. And, of course, I have got plenty of content planned for the winter break. The winter break is basically starting from, obviously, tomorrow until February the 11th, which is the first day of the first televised pre-season test in Bahrain. So that is the winter break, that's basically what, 8 weeks. Which, I mean, sounds a lot, but it will just absolutely fly by. I'm sure of it. But yeah, I just want to get into quickly what videos will be coming out on the channel between now and the start of pre-season testing. So obviously I'm doing this stream today. Tomorrow there will be a podcast episode where I will be obviously reviewing whatever has happened in the race today. So don't worry if you somehow miss, the key parts of the stream. Today, I will be doing a podcast tomorrow reviewing the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix. And then, after that, there will be 4 videos coming out on the channel between basically tomorrow and Christmas. Those 4 videos will be an F1 2025 end of season driver rankings video. That video should come out next week. Hopefully, say Thursday or Friday next week. So that'll be the first of the 4 videos. The second video will be one about how the championship was won. Of course, we need to see who wins the championship first. And what that video will be about is, what the real reasons were behind whoever won the championship, winning the championship. And we'll also give our view as to the quality of the campaign and, all of that stuff. So that'll be the second video. The third video is going to be another driver rankings video, but instead we're going to rank the drivers, the current drivers, based on how they've done through the ground effect era. So basically we're going to be ranking the current drivers based on how they've done from the start of 2022 until the end of 2025. That will probably be an even more interesting driver ranking video than the driver ranking video for just this season. We'll see. But yeah, that'll be the third video. And then the fourth and final video before Christmas will be a video on Kimi Antonelli, where we'll be looking at his debut season, the pros, the cons, what went well, what went bad, and looking at whether he truly is going to be a great in the future of Formula One. And then we'll have Christmas, we'll have New Year. There won't be any content on the channel, obviously, over Christmas and New Year. My first video in 2026 will probably be about middle of January. And then we'll have a few more videos coming out on the channel. And those videos are as follows. We're going to have a video about Ferrari, where I'm going to review their 2025 season. Looking at, again, the real reasons why it was a failure, going through all of the key members and looking at how they contributed to the disaster of a season. So there'll be that. We're also going to do a video about, We're going to do a video on Christian Horner. Because, of course, he was sacked by Red Bull earlier this season. And I want to do a video on how that situation all happened and how it all fell apart, basically, for Horner at Red Bull. So that'll be another video that will be coming out. And then there will be a few 2026 related videos, such as an early F1 2026 predictions video, where basically I'm going to make my predictions for the 2026 season, not based off of any data. So, don't take that video too seriously. So yeah, we'll be doing that. I'm also going to do a 2026 regulations explainer video, where we'll try to simply explain the key changes to the regulations. And then the other, I think the other 2 videos I've got planned is a video about Audi for 2026, where we're going to be looking ahead to, what we're going to be looking ahead to, what their prospects are for 2026 and beyond. And then also, we're going to be doing a video about Red Bull as well, in terms of their prospects for the new era, because obviously a lot changing at the Red Bull team for 2026 and beyond. So, yeah, so after January, like I said, there'll be a Ferrari 2025 review video, a Christian Horner video, and then a early 2026 predictions video, a video explaining the new regulations, and then a couple videos on Red Bull and Audi's prospects for 2026. And then once we're done with all that content, we will then fully focus on pre-season testing for 2026. And then, of course, the first weekend of March is the first race of 2026 in Melbourne. Cannot wait for it. Cannot wait to see who is popping up there up front of the field in Melbourne. And I know you guys can't wait too. So, yeah, those are all the videos planned for the winter break. There is another video that I have been working on for the last few months, which is quite a long video. I don't know if it's going to come out in the winter break, though, so I'm not going to guarantee anything. If it does, great. If it doesn't, then it will probably come out in the summer instead. But yeah, those are all the videos that I've got planned for the winter break. So it should be 4 videos before Christmas, and then another, 5 or 6 in January and early February. And of course, I will also be covering that shakedown test in Barcelona at the end of January as well. So yeah, plenty of content will be coming your way over the winter break between the end of this Grand Prix and the start of the first televised pre-season test on February the 11th in Bahrain. So make sure to subscribe, hit the notifications bell, and get yourself ready for all that content heading your way over the winter. Yeah, Michael James saying 12 weeks until lights out in Albert Park. It is not very far away, guys. Not very far away at all. Anyway, keep your comments coming, because now I am going to read out some of the best comments in the chat, as we've got just over, or just under actually, an hour to go until the race is underway. Hello to Astro, hello to Herman, Yanni, Francisco, like I said, good to see you. First time I've seen you in a while. Francisco saying, hello Chaz, one of the first races of the year that I'll be stopping by and watch fully. Basically want to see if McLaren can lose it. Yeah, quite a few people, extra people watching this weekend that don't normally watch every race, to see what happens with this title decider. It could be a giant anticlimax, or it could be one of the best title decider, or deciding races we've ever had. It'll probably be somewhere in the middle. Let me find some comments if I just go down the chat. Pat Math, I think it is, says backing up the field is risky. There is no tie degradation. I wouldn't say there's no tie degradation, but yeah, backing up the field is risky, but it's a lot less risky if you do it after the first and only round of pit stops, because then you can't get jumped through an undercut or anything, like that. So I think it is very likely that Max, if he is out front, will decide to back the pack up after the pit stop phase is done. Let me just scroll down a bit further. Cadillac Donuts is hoping for boring, expecting stupid. I think we will get something, some sort of drama today, even if it's only at the start. Again, is it going to be a 2008 or 2012-esque type title decider? No. Mainly because we're racing at this circuit and not Interlagos. But, yeah, we will get some sort of drama, no doubt about it. It's not going to be just a procession to the end. If it was, then it would be easily the worst title decider in Formula One history. But ultimately, we'll see what goes at the start and just how that develops into the rest of the race. Yanni says, I think McLaren will screw it up, team and all drivers. Obviously, McLaren, in terms of their current form, not in good form whatsoever in terms of getting it right as a team. Last Grand Prix, they threw away through a very stupid mistake of not pitting their cars under the safety car. And then the race before, they got both cars disqualified by running too low to the ground with the plank. So, cannot afford another race-costing error as a team, because if they do, then it will cost them the championship probably today on the driver's side. Obviously, the Constructors' Championship was wrapped up, feels like ages ago, a couple months ago. I think it was won in Singapore. Rooks saying in the chat, anyone else catch the news that Jensen is retiring from upper tiers of racing? Last photo I saw was in his race gear. He had very thick glasses on. I haven't seen anything about that. And I've been on social media today, and yeah, I've not I've not seen anything about that. So if that is true, assuming it is, then yeah, fair enough decision from Jensen. Obviously, he's continued racing for quite a few years after his Formula One career's finished. He's what? Is he? How old's Jensen now? Like 45, 46, I think. So, he doesn't want to be racing forever, and he doesn't need to, because, I mean, he's already had a long career. Yeah, he's 45. He turns 46 in January. His birthday is almost the exact same day as me. Yeah, I mean, after he retired from Formula One, he could have just stopped racing completely after that, but decided to continue. I actually went to see him at, what do you call it? I went to was it 6 Hours of Silverstone event in 2018 that the World Endurance Championship did, and he was racing for SMP. Was Jensen in the LMP2 car? I think it was. The main reason I went was to see Alonso in the Toyota, which ended up getting disqualified from the race in the end. But yeah, I did actually manage to go see Jensen technically in sports cars. I think he was racing alongside another ex F1 driver, I think, at the time. I can't remember exactly. But yeah, he's had a good post F1 career. But obviously, in the last few years, he has stepped up his media side and media duties. I mean, we knew for years that Jensen was going to be a pundit or a commentator. I mean, that was the running joke for, it felt like almost his entire career, was that he was going to be a commentator and going to be, Martin Brundle's replacement, basically, in the commentary box, which I think technically is still on that that is probably going to happen, given that Jensen is still pretty young for a commentator. When Martin Brundle is what? How old is Martin now? Got to be what, 65, 66, I think. Let me just check how old Martin is. Good to see, by the way, Martin Brundle at the Grand Prix, obviously, for this title decided. Doesn't go to every race these days. And yeah, Martin is 66 years old. Been a commentator now for almost 30 years. 2027 will be the 30-year anniversary of Martin Brundle's permanent race commentary career. So shows you just how long he's been around. I feel like he's been around forever, quite frankly. But yeah, if that is true with Jensen, then yeah, happy retirement. Hopefully he can have, and yeah, he can concentrate on the media side. Which yeah, eventually I'm pretty confident he will be the co-commentator for the British TV Formula One option, whether that's Sky or whether it goes to Netflix in the future or whatever. Francisco asking Chaza, what about the scenario where Piastri gets up to second, considering Lando tends to start poorly? If Piastri gets up to second, then he's gonna have to hope that Lando somehow has a start similar to what Sebastian Vettel had in 2012 in the final race, where Vettel had a poor start and then got hit by someone and fell to the very back. That's what Piastri would need, really, for Oscar to have a chance at the championship, even if he got up to second. But obviously that would benefit Verstappen even more than Oscar, because Max would still be ahead. That's the thing with Oscar, is not only has he got to outscore Lando today by 17 points, he's also got to beat Verstappen by 5 points. So Oscar basically has to win the race today and hope that Lando finishes 6th or lower, which realistically is, well, it's quite unrealistic, to be honest. But if Piastri gets ahead of Norris at the start and Norris is in third, there's no need at that point for McLaren to do anything, because again, if Lando finishes third, he will be champion. That's all that matters. The only way team orders are going to come into it is if Lando is not on the podium and Piastri is, and then they'll probably swap positions to get Lando onto the podium. That's what it sounds like McLaren are going to do. I hope team orders doesn't come into it. I really hope not, but if it happens, it happens. But really, it shouldn't happen, because, again, Lando and McLaren should be easily quick enough to finish on the podium, regardless of what Piastri does or what Verstappen does in this race. So we'll see what happens at the start, but it's all in Lando's hands, and it's all down to what he does. Adib asking, as Lando, do you go for it or stay behind Max? I would go for it, because unless Max tries to do what Michael Schumacher did at Jerez in '97 with Villeneuve and deliberately tried to take Lando out of the race, then realistically it will only benefit Lando, because if they collide, then realistically it will hurt Verstappen as much as Lando. So as long as Lando, if he does collide with Verstappen, as long as Lando doesn't collide to the point where he is out of the race, then sending it up the inside, maybe at the hairpin on the first lap, is something maybe worth going for, because Lando, if Lando and Max take each other out, but Lando is able to still stay in the race and still, get a good enough result to win the championship compared to what Piastri does, then, it's still on. So if I was Lando, if Max is backing Lando up into the pack, if I'm Lando, then that I would try to overtake, because if he can get past Verstappen somehow and then build a bit of a gap, it's going to take a really special drive from Max to get back somehow past Norris, because that McLaren is pretty quick. Let me just scroll down a bit further. Good to see Crystal, by the way, in chat. Yeah, Rook saying Button apparently said, "This will be my last race. I've always liked Bahrain. I think it's a fun track, and I'm going to enjoy it as much as I can, because this will be the end of my professional racing career." Apparently, he told that to BBC Radio Somerset. Obviously, Button is from Somerset. That's why they covered that. And it's the 8 hours of Bahrain race. It is. So yeah, hopefully he has a good send off. Goes out on a high in whatever way he can. Pete Pogson says, people moaning about Kimi's mistake last weekend in Qatar with Lando, now hoping other teams interfere to help Max. The hypocrisy. It's good to see the response from the F1 community, I must say, after what happened in Qatar, because Antonelli did not let Lando through. Absolutely no way. His tyres were finished. That's why he made the mistake he did, because his tyres were absolutely gone, and Lando obviously took advantage. Of course, it would be a lot different coming into this race if Antonelli had held on to fourth ahead of Lando, because the gap would only be 10 points going into this race, meaning that for Max, all he'd have to do is win and hope that Lando finished lower than second. So it would have made it a bit more likely probably for Max to win the championship today. But again, Antonelli, he did not let Lando through. So yeah, good to see the response overall by the F1 community, like I said, to what was the reaction from absolute clowns online criticizing Antonelli for that was stupid. Francisco says, I still can't call Antonelli Kimi. I know there is only one Kimi, but we'll get used to it. Antonelli, if he fulfills his potential, might end up being the more successful Kimi. Yeah, but yeah. Let me see if I can find a few other comments from you guys before we get into the latter part of the build-up here. In about 10 minutes, I am going to bring my co-commentator for today's race on, which will be Niblo. Of course, he is rooting for Oscar Piastri, so just as a warning, he will not be unbiased, which is totally fine. He can do whatever he wants. So if Max and Lando do take each other off at any point, expect your ears to be absolutely destroyed, probably, by him screaming his head off at the possibility of Piastri then winning the championship. But yeah, because he does have skin in the game. Again, don't expect him to be totally unbiased, but I will remain totally unbiased as I always do. But yeah, just a pre-warning in case in case anything big happens for Piastri in his favor, he could start celebrating, which I wouldn't blame him for doing it, to be honest, because this is for Formula One, this is basically our Super Bowl, the final of everything. Yeah, Rook saying, just state that he's Australian, no need for lengthy explanations. Yeah, I could just say that, but we'll see how it goes. As Nib in the chat says, most classic Jazzer HD chat comments in the last 3 minutes. Indeed. But yeah, I'm going to read a few more comments, and then we will just then we will bring Nib on, get his thoughts ahead of this Grand Prix, as we've got just under 40 minutes to go until lights out. The cars, by the way, are now leaving the pit lane. Of course, you have to have left the pit lane before the 30-minute signal, 30 minutes obviously before the race begins. So they're just doing their prep laps to get a feel for the car before the race, and then obviously they'll be putting it on the grid ready for the start. But Rook saying he still wants Piastri to grab it. It would be an absolutely remarkable turnaround if Oscar does win the championship today. Again, it's probably the only way that's going to happen is if Max and Lando take each other off. But it is possible. It's not out of the realm of possibilities. It is something that could happen. Unlikely, but not impossible. So we will find out. Let me just scroll up a bit, because I think I might have missed a few comments from earlier. Astro saying, wonder if Red Bull will manage to use Yuki somehow. Yuki's last race, of course, potential for major controversy there. I don't see how they can, because one, Tsunoda is nowhere near quick enough to be anywhere near the McLarens. But also, I just don't see Red Bull trying anything like what maybe certain people are thinking that they could do with Tsunoda. Obviously, back in 2021, we had Perez hold up Lewis Hamilton by multiple seconds to bring Verstappen closer to Hamilton. Again, though, the only way that scenario happens here is if Tsunoda can remain quick enough to remain inside the pit window of Lando Norris. And that's what's going to make things interesting in terms of if Max is leading at the start. Because if Max backs the pack up during the first stint and then the McLaren's pit and they come out behind Tsunoda, what is stopping Red Bull from just keeping Tsunoda out until Norris overtakes him? And then at that point, if Norris is struggling to overtake Tsunoda, by the way, Tsunoda has the fastest car in a straight line in the speed traps, then it becomes a Vitaly Petrov, Fernando Alonso type situation from 2010. So that, again, is what makes it so interesting in terms of what Max out front is going to do and when he's going to back the pack up Because if he does it in the first stint, then there's quite a bit of risk with that. But also there is the potential reward of then the McLarens getting stuck behind Tsunoda. And then Tsunoda, holding up Lando and keeping him away from the podium. So, there is that possibility. So, ultimately, we'll see what Verstappen decides to do. Nib saying, "Don't worry, the mic will cut out if that happens." Probably. Let me see if I can find a couple more comments before we bring you on. Astro makes a great point. Lando only needs third, but then Nigel Mansell only needed third in 1986 as well. And yeah, that was a three-way title decider that weekend in Adelaide between Prost, Mansell, and Piquet. And like you say, Mansell only needed to finish on the podium, and then his tyre failed, and he was out of the race. And Prost somehow took the championship, despite Williams having the, I think, pretty clear fastest car that year. So, again, it's a possibility. Obviously, in current Formula One, tyre failures don't result in retirements necessarily like they did back in the day. But it is still another possibility that could occur. In the 58 laps, remember that is the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix. Francisco says Tsunoda can also get lapped. If McLaren do at any point come up behind Tsunoda to lap him, I don't see Red Bull playing games like that. They would get surely such a massive penalty if they tried anything like what they could do with Tsunoda if he was a lapped car. The only thing I think they'll try and use Tsunoda for is, like I said, if McLaren come up behind Tsunoda after a pit stop and it's full position, the only thing I think they'll try is have Tsunoda hold up Lando as much as possible and stop him getting on the podium. That's the only thing they can do. But Tsunoda, he's in 10th place, so he's not that far away from the front runners. He's a lot closer than he normally is. But whether he has an effect on the proceedings, we'll have to wait and see. Again, it just depends on what Max does out front, where Tsunoda is, how he does in the first stint as well, and whether he can play some sort of role for Verstappen and Red Bull. But I think I'm going to post a link of the stream out, and we are going to bring my co-commentator Niblo on for this Grand Prix. So let me just quickly post a link of the stream out one final time, and then we'll bring him on. Let me just post this out quickly. Come join us here to Watchalong. F1 title decider in Abu Dhabi. And there you go. Hopefully get some more people hopping on. Also, for everyone watching, make sure to smash the like button. We are on 51 likes. Let's try and get up to 70 plus likes if we can in the next half an hour, as we've only got half an hour to go until it's underway. The moment we've been waiting for the last week is just half an hour away. But let me just adjust a couple settings and then we'll bring Nib on. So, yeah, just give me a second, guys. As, yeah, all the cars have now left the pit lane. Now we're past the 30 limit or 30-minute warning. Right. And are you there?
Hello.
Yeah, loud and clear. How are you on this day?
A bit stressed now, I must admit, even though, Piastri ultimately has nothing to lose. Um, but yeah, excited, nervous, anxious, sick, ill, upset tummy. Is there anything else?
I, even though I've not got any, driver really supporting here, even I'm incredibly nervous, I must say, for this, for this title decide, especially when it comes to the start, because I mean, normally I get anxious before the start, but for a race this important, it is really, really, really tense. And of course, for you, it all does come down to the start, doesn't it? For Piastri, in terms of if he is to have any chance of winning it today, he has to hope that Verstappen basically does to Norris what he did to Piastri at the start of this race last year, which is obviously collide.
Yep.
With Oscar, we'll start just with him. As you say, Piastri, he's got nothing to lose. Obviously, a collision at the start is, I wouldn't say highly unlikely, but it probably won't happen between Verstappen and Norris. What do you expect from Piastri in terms of his pace today? Do you think if he does absolutely go for it, do you think he can legitimately on pace win the race, even if he doesn't win the championship, or do you think he's just gonna, finish third and not really be in the fight for the victory?
Well, I think it's difficult because even though since the track changes here, it's still incredibly difficult to overtake. And if you're on the same lap tires, same strategy, I don't think anybody is going to in the top three is going to overtake each other. The only way is if there's a significant tire delta. So I think if nothing changes off the start and they race normally to the finish, which isn't going to happen because I think most of us would expect in normal situation for Verstappen to maintain the lead and then at some stage do a Fernando Alonso and back up the pack. So today is just not a straightforward race in any way, shape, or form. Obviously, the start will dictate a lot. I think you know what I would like to happen.
Yeah.
Piastri knows what he wants to happen. Um, so yeah, we'll leave it at that.
Yeah, obviously the start is so crucial to what ends up happening with the top three today. I think if Lando does get the lead on the first lap, I think the championship is pretty much done at that point, unless Lando has like a serious reliability issue. If Max, though, as you say, maintains the lead, then obviously once he backs the pack up at some point, which we're expecting him to do, who knows what that will do. And then, yeah, if there's a collision, then obviously it opens the door for Piastri. With Max, though, as you say, he's going to do an Alonso at some point. We saw Alonso obviously do it in Qatar last week. Alonso, though, does tend to do it earlier on in a race rather than later on, like Lewis Hamilton did at this race in 2016, where Hamilton tried in, I think, the last 20 laps or so to try and back Rosberg up into Vettel and Verstappen. Do you think Max is going to try and back up the pack in the first stint, or do you think he'll wait after all the pit stops are done and then back them up into Russell, Leclerc, and Alonso and that?
Yeah, it's a tricky one because, of course, you don't want to be backing up the pack and then get undercut massively. Um, so that's a difficult situation. That's probably why it is sort of best suited to do it in the final stint for maximum safety. Um, so yeah, that's a tricky one because obviously that's the last thing Verstappen would want to do is to throw away positions. That's a weird one. It's like Karen Hatchinov on the grid there.
Yeah,
It is, isn't it? Yep.
yeah,
um. So yeah, for maximum safety, you'd want to do it in the final stint, but I don't think that's what Mac's going to do.
yeah. I think as you said, final stint is probably the safest way, but Max has to try whatever he can. And I think, as I said when I was talking about it earlier, if he does it in the first stint, there is high risk, as you were saying, with the undercut, but also high reward if it pays off. If he was to do it in that part of the race. So one thing we can guarantee is that there will be probably a 20-lap stint in the race where he backs up the McLarens. We just don't know exactly when. Obviously, if he was to do it in the first stint, by the time we get to the first round of pit stops, it will be about lap 20-ish. And then after that, obviously, we'll see what happens. I think, though, after all the pit stops are done, if he hasn't done it by, say, lap 30, 35, I think by then he'll start to really back off the pace and hold those McLarens up to try and get Russell and Leclerc to close in. For Lando Norris, obviously, he is the championship leader going into this Grand Prix. 12 points clear of Verstappen, who is the nearest rival. For Norris, as long as he keeps it clean at the start, realistically, what chance would you give him of winning the championship? For me, I'd probably say like a 75% chance. Do you think it's higher than that if the start goes okay enough, even if he loses the position? Because that McLaren, as we've seen this weekend, has been very quick, hasn't it?
It has been, but I mean, Max also in the long runs on Friday looking quite quick. Um, I mean, if Norris keeps it all good at the start, then yeah, he should be fine. But I mean, because ultimately, I think if Piastri and Norris, um, well, I think Piastri would eventually play team orders and play the team game if there was a situation which didn't help him whatsoever. So I think having Piastri there at some stage could be key for Norris if everything goes smoothly, as there's quite the lineup of footballers here on the grid. My goodness gracious me. Um,
And tennis
and Mr.
players.
Sinner.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of famous faces at the race, obviously, for this big event. Um, yeah, I think, obviously we're building this race up and up and up, but it does run the risk of being quite the anti-climax today because, I mean, as we're saying, as long as the start goes fine enough for Lando, pace of the car should be easily good enough for him to finish, at least third, which is what he needs to finish on, or to win the world championship. So I think a lot of the potential drama today depends. Probably, I think 70% of the potential drama today depends on the world champ. Depends on the start of the race in terms of if we're going to get any dramatic turnarounds in the championship. If it goes as as it usually does here in Abu Dhabi, where pretty much everyone gets away in grid position, then it's probably going to be a pretty simple race for Lando Norris to secure his first world title. For this race today, obviously, we'll get into predictions in a minute for the top three. How dramatic of a race do you think it will be? I mean, it's not going to be a complete, 0 out of 10, but Do you think it does all come down to the start, or do you think we could get some in-race drama? What type of excitement do you think we could get?
Yeah, well, it's not gonna be 2021.
No.
That's for sure. But I mean, looking back, 2016 was quite anticlimactic. I think if we get anywhere in between the two of them, um, with everything done legally and no dramas from the officials, then I think it will be pretty good. Somewhere in between the two, I'll take.
Yeah, I must admit, I am worried that we are going to get a very 2016 type decider, which, like you say, was a really big anticlimax in the end. Um, so yeah, we'll have to find out once we get the race underway, which I've just looked, just under 20 more minutes until we are underway for the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix. So for my top three, I went for Verstappen, Norris, and Piastri, exactly the way it is on the grid. What's your top three?
Uh, do you want hopium or
Give me
perhaps a little
both.
bit of realism?
Give me both.
All right. God, I can't even keep a straight face saying this. Hopium is obviously Piastri, Russell, Leclerc, something like that. Um, or no, actually, even sweeter would actually be Piastri, Verstappen, um, and then Russell third. That would be nice. Without mentioning where number four would be. Realistically, I think Verstappen will win the race, um, followed by Norris and then Piastri.
Yeah, it's most likely to end up that way. But like you say, I mean, if we do have a collision at the start, even if it doesn't end their races, if Piastri can just waltz on through, then he should easily win the race. But then that's the thing uh, with Oscar in terms of his chances today, is even if that happens, he would still need Lando to have like a really to lose a lot of time, coming back to the pits, and in the pits, if he does continue in the race, or even hope that Lando gets knocked out on the first lap, because even if Piastri wins and Lando has whatever drama at the start, he still needs Lando to finish sixth or lower for him to win
Yeah.
the championship. So we'll see. I mean, in a cruel way, this would be very cruel on you, and I know Astro, who's massively hoping for Piastri today. It'd be massively cruel if there was a collision at the start, but Lando did a Vettel Brazil 2012-esque drive to just about get enough points still. But who knows whether that actually will end up happening.
I th- I think the suggestion of Norris being able to do a drive like Vettel with significant damage is quite disrespectful to Sebastian Vettel.
Yeah, probably. As talking of Sebastian Vettel, we might actually see him at some point. There is rumours about that, because I know his father is at the Grand Prix. His father, I saw there was a picture online of his father at the track yesterday, so we might get a shot of Sebastian at some point. I don't know if he's there at the moment, but he might pop up at some point. Who knows? As they're just going through the national anthems. So we're only 15 minutes from the formation lap getting underway. So guys, make sure in the chat to get in your final predictions for this Grand Prix. Not only who do you think is going to win, but most importantly, who is going to win the championship? Will it be Lando Norris, the championship leader, or will Max Verstappen turn it around and take his fifth world title, or will Oscar Piastri win and take Australia's first world title for 45 years? That's the top 3 in the championship during the national out. They're all stood around the Drivers' Championship trophy. So tantalizingly close as they're just doing the flyover of the planes as well. So then we just go through final few of your comments as well. Good to see a good amount watching. For everyone watching, make sure to smash the like button if you haven't already. Let's try and get up to 100 plus likes if we can in the next, say, 10 minutes or so. It'd be great if we could do that. But yeah, I'll go through some of your final comments before we get into the start of this race. Looney Classics says, what if Norris and Oscar crash at the first corner? Well, that would be the icing on the cake in terms of McLaren throwing away the Drivers' Championship, especially in these last couple races. And obviously Verstappen would be delighted at that. But, I mean, it is possible. They haven't collided. I mean, they collided in the sprint in Texas, but that wasn't really a proper collision because it was only because Hulkenberg and Piastri had contact and then Oscar had nowhere to go but to hit Lando. So it wasn't really like a proper teammate collision, but it is possible. We have to remember that we had a collision at turn 1 last year between Verstappen and Piastri, towards the front. So maybe, Verstappen or Norris could collide, Verstappen or Piastri again, or Norris and Piastri. Again, it is a possibility. As TNB says, Bin Russell has to carry. And Porsche 911 Blue says, Russell, do us a favour, or do us the favour. Remember, though, Russell has said publicly that he wants Lando to win the championship. So, yeah. Let's. If you're wanting Russell to end Norris's hopes, just be a bit careful with that because he's a lot more likely to want to end Max Verstappen's hopes than Norris's. So we'll see. The advantage, though, for Russell, if he gets a really good start, obviously the top 3 are not going to want to take a risk against Russell if he goes for it at turn 1. So Russell could take a bit of a risk at the first corner, and it could pay off quite handsomely if, as long as he doesn't, do what he has done at times and just go steaming in and take out a load of cars. But we'll see what role he plays potentially. Crystal says Lando looks very nervous in his interviews. Not a surprise, really. I mean, who wouldn't be nervous? We do know, though, I mean, he's even talked about it. Lando has said that he does get very nervous before race starts. He said that it's always been a thing with him. And I think that's a big reason why he does so regularly get poor starts, because he is a lot more nervous than others at a race start. So from Lando's perspective, the start is probably the number one thing he has to get right, because it's the number one thing he usually gets wrong in a race. So as long as he maintains position, then he's cleared the most dangerous part of his race, really, at that point.
And that's also the shame about this race being at Abu Dhabi and not Brazil, because turn 1 is a super short run. I mean, it's reasonably short in Brazil, but stuff can happen in the first, out of the center S's, through the center S's.
Down to turn 4 and all of that. Yeah.
I mean, obviously you have a whole, basically half a lap where stuff could happen here, up until the really fast left-hander at the start of the third sector, end of the second. But yeah, turn 1, not so much.
And it is, as we saw last year, it is difficult to make an overtake there because you really have to be either a lot later on the brakes or really, confidently alongside. I mean, Max, he sent it at turn 1 last year, but he went over the curb and that pushed him wide and into Piastri. So even if you're super aggressive, if you get too much on the curb on the inside, or you get squeezed a bit, it can result in disaster. Turn 1 is not one of the most likely overtaking places at this circuit, as we know. The hairpin and the chicane, and then, like you said, the fast left-hander going into the final sector is a lot more of a possible overtaking spot. As I will finish up the poll results in a moment, we do have a clear winner as to who you guys think is going to win the championship. I just want to say quickly, if there is a hype button below the screen on this stream, make sure to click that and to hype the stream. That basically just reposts the stream amongst YouTube and gives the stream even more traction. So if you could do that, make sure to do that. I don't know if it's visible not to everyone from what I've seen. Some people it is, some people it isn't. So if it is there for you, make sure to click it and hype the stream. It should be around about where, or just above the description. But also, again, quickly before we get into things, make sure to smash the like button before we get into this race, because it, of course, lets me know that you guys enjoy the content as we're about to hit 100 likes. So thank you guys very much for that. But let's finish up the poll, which has been running for a few hours, because we have a very clear winner. And I asked you guys who will win the Drivers' Championship today. And we've had just over 1,500 votes, and 73% of you have voted for Max Verstappen. To be fair, I think if Verstappen was 1,000 points behind, I think he would still win that vote, to be honest. Because a lot of you, I've noticed, do believe in Verstappen no matter what. 22% for Lando Norris and 5% for Oscar Piastri. I think that poll, though, in terms of who's voted, it might be more of a who... I think the people voting, it might be more of who people want to win the championship more than who people actually think will get the championship won. As we have got just 7 minutes to go until the race begins. So, before we get into the race, let's go through some key stats before lights out. And we're going to start with the championship permutations. For Max Verstappen, he must outscore Lando Norris by 13 points to become world champion. So essentially, Max needs to win the race and hope that Lando doesn't finish on the podium. For Oscar Piastri, he needs to outscore Lando by 17 points and outscore Verstappen by 5 points to become the champion. And for Lando Norris, it's all, again, in his hands. As long as Lando Norris finishes on the podium, regardless of what Max and Oscar do, Lando Norris will be world champion. There are your championship permutations. Let's go through, though, the rest of the championship standings below the top 3. George Russell, you've then got in 4th. Leclerc 5th. Hamilton 6th. Antonelli in 7th. Albon 8th. Sainz 9th. And Isaac Hadjar in 10th. We'll see who ends up in the top 10 of the drivers' standings at the end of this race. On the constructors' side, McLaren, obviously the champions. Mercedes 2nd. Red Bull 3rd. Mercedes, they should secure 2nd. Red Bull 3rd. Ferrari have secured, unfortunately for them, 4th. Williams 5th. Racing Bulls are 6th. 12 points clear of Aston Martin. That fight is not done with, but realistically, you would think Racing Bulls will hang on to 6th. Aston Martin are 7th. Only 7 points clear of Haas. That's another battle to look out for. And Sauber are only 5 points behind Haas in 9th. So we could get a couple position changes in the Constructors' Championship for those vital teams in the lower positions. And Alpine, obviously, destined to finish in last. Here are, though, some key stats regarding the front-running teams going into this final Grand Prix. McLaren, remember, they have won this Grand Prix before. They won here last year with Lando Norris, who won relatively comfortably from Carlos Sainz. McLaren, though, since the Grand Prix here in Abu Dhabi began in 2009, they've only took 2 wins here. The only other win was with Lewis Hamilton in 2011. And yeah, last year, 1st and 10th it was. Can they replicate that, at least with taking a race win? The Red Bull, their last win in Abu Dhabi was 2 years ago with Max Verstappen. They've won quite a lot recently here in Abu Dhabi. They've took 4 wins in the last 10 years, and 4 of those wins since COVID. Last year, it was 6th and a DNF for the Red Bull team. Obviously, they were cost dearly by Max having his collision at the start. That was when he had the championship wrapped up. Today, he will be a lot more on it. Ferrari, they've never won the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix, so don't be expecting really anything from them. And their last Formula One win was in October of 2024, 14 months ago. Last year, though, they did finish 2nd and 3rd, a brilliant double podium as they tried to win the Constructors last year. But yeah, today they are in nowhere near as good of a position. And finally for Mercedes, keep an eye on them. They could maybe win today. Last win here in Abu Dhabi was 6 years ago with Lewis Hamilton. They've also been the most successful team at this track in the last 10 years. 5 wins in the last 10 years. Last year, it was 4th and 5th. Can they go one better and at least get on the podium? Or maybe even win the race? We will find out. But let's get into your starting grid for this title decider in Abu Dhabi. On the front row, Max Verstappen in 2nd in the championship and the championship leader, Lando Norris. 3rd, Oscar Piastri. 4th, George Russell. On the 3rd row, Charles Leclerc and Fernando Alonso. 4th row, Gabriel Bortoleto and Esteban Ocon. Completing the top 10, Isaac Hadjar, who will be racing for Red Bull next year. And the man he's replacing, Yuki Tsunoda. Just outside of the top 10, Oliver Behrman and Carlos Sainz. In 13th and 14th, Liam Lawson and Kimi Antonelli. 15th and 16th, Lance Stroll and Lewis Hamilton, who's won this Grand Prix so many times. Penultimate row of the grid, Alex Albon and Nico Hülkenberg. And on the back row, the 2 Alpines are Pierre Gasly and Franco Colapinto. As we now await the start of this race. And the formation lap will be underway in a couple minutes. And as you can see on the left-hand side, I've got all the tyres there ready. Most people should start the medium. There will be here and there, there'll be drivers starting on the hard, maybe a couple drivers starting on the soft compound tyre. But most drivers should be on the medium, and I'm expecting definitely the top 10 to be on the medium tyre to start with. Should be a pretty simple one-stop strategy today, unless we get a safety car midway through or something like that. As Rook's saying in the chat, everyone on the mediums except Piastri, Tsunoda, Antonelli and Stroll on hard tyres, and Hamilton, Albon and Hülkenberg on the soft tyres. So Oscar Piastri is on an alternate strategy. Hard tyres to start with. We'll see if that pays off. Let me just update that. Yeah, Hamilton, Albon and Hülkenberg on the soft compound tyres. And Piastri and Tsunoda, Antonelli and Stroll on the hard compound tyres. So we will see what that hard tyre strategy does for Piastri, starting up in 3rd on that tyre, and Tsunoda, who could have a factor in this race on the hard tyre, as well. As the teams abandon the cars, the blankets are off, and the formation lap about to begin in a moment. What do you think of that decision, by the way, Nib? Piastri on the hards.
Interesting, isn't it?
Does that tell you absolutely, as formation lap has just started, does that tell you absolutely that he's going to go a lot longer than Max and Lando, or are they just trying something different for the sake of it?
I'm not sure, honestly, but it's very rare for McLaren to split their strategies at all, let alone at the start of a Grand Prix. So I am wondering, as a skeptical Oscar Piastri fan, whether or not this is some team orders business starting already.
As they just showed on the broadcast, if you start on the hard tyre, you can go until lap 40 or even lap 42 before making your first and only pit stop. But if you do that, then you're probably going to go onto the soft tyre to finish. So we will see. As you say, McLaren very rarely split strategy. Mercedes and Ferrari are normally the teams that do that. The Mercedes especially do that quite a bit. But McLaren...
Yeah, I wonder if this is to counter Verstappen potentially backing up everyone. That's the only thing I can think of.
Possibly. I mean, if they are splitting it in terms of Oscar going a lot longer than Lando, what they could be doing is Lando is doing the undercut and Oscar the overcut to trap Verstappen, essentially, to where he can't really go anywhere unless he's obviously pulled away from the cars behind. So we will see how that plays out, as Verstappen and Norris are just coming up to the penultimate corner on this formation lap. Now through and into slowly the final corner, as the sun almost has set, as there is plenty of orange in the grandstands, many for Verstappen and also McLaren, as well as Verstappen, Norris and Piastri now do their final burnouts. And the start is so crucial, as Verstappen looks like he's got his car pointed slightly towards Lando Norris. So it looks like he is going to be immediately trying to cover off the McLaren down to the first corner, as most of the field have now lined up. And the final two cars on the grid will be the Alpines of Gasly and Franco Colapinto. So here we are, a title decider in Abu Dhabi. Who will be the world champion? Norris, Verstappen, or Piastri? We're about to find out. As the green flag waves, the lights are on. 2, 3, 4, 5 lights, and straight away we're off as Verstappen comes across to cover off Norris, and he does it brilliantly as they all get away just fine. Alonso's had a great start. He's alongside Leclerc, and Alonso is nearly up to fourth, but Leclerc holds it. Leclerc is in fourth place as the top three all get away just fine. And yeah, Russell has not had a great start. Leclerc sends it up the inside of Piastri at the hairpin, but Piastri gets a much better exit. So there you go. They're all getting away okay for the minute, as Norris has not had the best exit from the hairpin. Piastri right in the slipstream. Alonso side by side with Leclerc down to the chicane. And Alonso is going to go right round the outside, but Leclerc holds it round the outside on the exit and keeps the position, as Piastri right in the slipstream again of Norris up to the end of the middle sector. Will he go round the outside? Yes, he does, but does he hold it? He does. Piastri is up to second. Norris in third. Norris did not fight that as hard as he could have, but he doesn't necessarily have to, as Verstappen already
Fucking God!
as pulling a bit of a gap through the final sector And we now begin lap 2 of 58. Verstappen leads, Piastri second, Norris third, Leclerc fourth, Alonso 5th, Russell 6th, Bortoletto 7th, Hadjar is 8th, Ocon 9th, Tsunoda 10th, Lawson in 11th, and then Behrman, Sainz, Hamilton, and then Albon, Stroll. Antonelli's had a horrible start. He's down to 17th, and then Hülkenberg, Gasly, Colapinto. So there you go. As Lando Norris has already fallen back into the clutches of Leclerc, who has DRS on Norris, but is nowhere near close enough to think about a move into the chicane. It's Max Verstappen out front already, a second and a half clear of Piastri. So Max is, for the minute, sprinting away. As they come into the beginning of the final sector, and yeah, Norris not going particularly quickly. He's really looking quite slow already in these first couple laps. Hopefully, from his point of view, he'll settle down soon enough. As Hülkenberg, I think, did lose position to Pierre Gasly briefly. Lewis Hamilton is on the move. He's up to 13th. Having a great start so far as we are on lap 3. Max Verstappen out front, nearly 2 seconds clear of Piastri. Leclerc trying to hang on to Norris here. Norris in third. Norris almost a second clear of Leclerc. Norris is pulling away. The Ferrari just isn't quick enough to keep up. But Leclerc is trying all he can. And he does get DRS Leclerc down this long back straight to the chicane, but Norris comfortably far ahead. As Russell saying on the radio that they need to check his brakes because his brake pedal feels like it's gone long. So not great there for Russell. But let me just correct who is on what tyre compound. As Lewis Hamilton in 13th on the soft, Sainz on the medium, Albon on the soft, and then Stroll and Antonelli on the hard compound tyre. As we're about to begin lap 4, Verstappen 1.8 seconds on lap 4 clear of Piastri. Norris second and a half behind his teammate, and Leclerc still within a second. Leclerc doing a great job to hang on to the back of that McLaren, as Leclerc is also starting to drop slowly but surely. Alonso, who's already holding up George Russell, who is clearly quicker in a quicker car, as they come through the hairpin and down the back straight. Leclerc looks a tenth or so closer on this occasion, but he's not close enough to overtake us. Russell is going down the inside of Alonso into the chicane, and Russell vitally up to 5th, and now he can get into that fight for the podium. So Russell 5th as Leclerc right up behind Norris here. Only 3 tenths behind as they come up to turn 9. And he forces Norris to defend. But Norris was far enough ahead that Leclerc couldn't really get his car alongside. Lando Norris is very slow at this part of the race. I don't know if he's still a bit jittery in the car or whatever after what happened at the start there with Piastri getting past him, but he needs to wake up because he's falling backwards. As out front, Verstappen, 2.2 seconds clear. As McLaren telling Norris they're happy with where they are as long as Lando is comfortable. And Lando doesn't necessarily look too comfortable, but he has just pulled over a second ahead of Leclerc. So looks like Lando, I think, might have just broken out of DRS range. Which if he has, that is crucial for his race. And yes, he has. So that's crucial now. Lando will probably start to pull away a bit. And we'll see when they show a replay of the start. But Nib, what a move by Oscar Piastri. On the hard tyres as well. We know they struggle for a bit of warm-up. What a move round the outside on Norris into, what was it, turn 9.
Oh, I mean, that's overtaken the season. That's absolutely unbelievable. I can't believe that Norris could actually be world champion when he gets mugged off like that on the regular.
And so now we get a replay of the start, and I'll let you take us through it, Nib, once I get through to it.
Yes, and as you note, there was quite a bit of a delayed reaction because for the start, I make sure to deafen so I don't get spoiled. But yeah, Verstappen, what a start by Alonso, by the way. Russell absolutely nowhere. Great job by Alonso to try and force himself up into 4th, but everything remaining quite comfortable at the front. Norris just a little bit further behind Verstappen than Piastri is, but Leclerc had a little look up at the inside of Piastri, as now they cut back to the actual start, which is where nothing really exciting happened except for this ridiculous prime Alonso start. But now it certainly looks like Norris has pulled away from the DRS of Leclerc. Leclerc's still not a million miles away, but God, that's horrific start by Russell. They're just showing the onboard now. A hell of a lot of wheel spin in every single phase of the start. And can they just actually show the overtake?
They're about to.
They're about to. Hallelujah. I can stop just waffling. But yeah, Piastri was able to do a little bit of a switchback through the middle chicane and got an unbelievable run down to the end of the back straight. Is ahead into the braking zone and just drives clean around the outside of Norris. Unbelievable overtake.
It was, like I said, on the harder tyre, which should have less grip at the start. And yeah, he's mugged Norris off there as Lando has actually fallen back into the clutches of Leclerc. Leclerc is back within a second of Norris as we're on lap 7. By the way, thank you to Deblinas8628, who has become a member of the channel. Thank you very much for that. By the way, for everyone watching, you can join the channel if you want. I have enabled channel memberships, which I know other channels have. So if you want to join the channel, make sure to do so. Anyway, we're on lap 7. Max Verstappen, 2.2 seconds clear in the lead. Lando just over a second behind Piastri. Leclerc is still keeping himself within a second of Norris and keeps getting that DRS. And if he keeps getting the DRS on Norris, he keeps Lando under pressure, which is great news for Max Verstappen and even Oscar Piastri, as Leclerc getting very close into the chicane. But superior traction, as expected, from the McLaren. So easily maintains the position. But Lando, now 1.7 behind his teammate. He really, I don't know why he is as slow as he is. I know people may say, oh, he's deliberately going slow to save his tyres, but he's putting himself at risk here of getting into a fight with Leclerc and Russell and falling off of the podium. He doesn't want to be giving them really a chance. He needs to be sprinting away from those two and building a gap so that he doesn't have to worry about them, so he can secure the podium. But he's not doing that at the minute. He's allowing Leclerc to keep up.
I love it. I don't know if you just saw, they put a team radio message to Norris saying, we've asked Piastri to up the pace a little bit.
Yeah, not quite sure about that. As surprisingly, Nico Hülkenberg has already pitted. So he's starting on the soft tyres, so he's getting those soft tyres out of the way. I'd imagine, unless he's gone to a set of hard tyres, that Hülkenberg might be on a 2-stop race. We'll see as Leclerc Once again, getting close here to Norris as they come up to the fast left-hander. But still not close enough. But he's keeping Lando very much under pressure for that third place. Leclerc would love to finish on the podium after what's been a very difficult last few races. Ferrari have not even been on the podium since Mexico. Never mind winning a race, as we are now on lap 9. Max Verstappen 2 seconds clear up front. Piastri quicker on that lap by a couple tenths of a second. Norris still got Leclerc with him. Russell is dropping back from these two, as Lewis Hamilton and Alex Albon both pitting. So it looks like the soft tyre runners are getting their tyres now out of the way. So they both pit, and Albon should come out in 19th, and Lewis Hamilton should be 18th. And we'll see what tyres they're on in a moment. Hulkenberg at the back is on the hard compound tyre, as Norris has just crept over a second ahead of Leclerc through the chicane. As Hulkenberg actually is now ahead of Albon, so he has actually jumped up a position there from an undercut, and Hulkenberg right behind Lewis Hamilton as well. So let me just update that we don't have any more soft tyre runners now. They've got rid of the soft compound, as Piastri in second, lapping at pretty much the same pace as Verstappen out front. As we're now on lap 10 of 58. So for the medium tyre runners, in terms of the people who started on the medium tyre, we are now halfway through the first stint, as Gasly and Hulkenberg under investigation, presumably for some sort of collision. As Leclerc we're looking at behind Norris, but Norris has pulled over a second ahead. So Leclerc now, I think, is starting to be dropped. As Alonso is doing what we expect Max to do at some point. He's already got a train of cars behind him, as Nico Hulkenberg does the fastest lap of 1:28.4. So
yeah, about a second quicker than what everyone else is doing at the front.
And that is proof that the undercut is, and we've always known this with this circuit, is very powerful at this track. And Hulkenberg is tucked up about second behind Lewis Hamilton. As we begin lap 11, Verstappen and Piastri still separated by about 2.2 seconds. Norris in third, about 1.8 behind his teammate, and about second clear of Leclerc. So about 4 seconds separating the top three on lap 11. And for Verstappen, really doesn't have the comfortability to really back up Piastri if he was to start to now, back into the pack, because Piastri is on the better tyre at this point, and if he was to allow Piastri to get within a second of him, I think Max would come under a lot of pressure from Piastri. As Lawson and Behrman under investigation, don't know why.
It was erratic driving, which is absolutely surprising when it comes to Liam Lawson.
Hopefully we'll see a replay at some point, as Leclerc we're looking at still about a second behind Norris. What a drive Leclerc's putting in here. He's a couple seconds ahead of Russell and is still just about in the fight for the podium. as Norris comes through the final corner to begin lap 12. And as it stands, Norris will be the world champion by 2 points if he finishes third. But there is still a long way to go. We are not even a quarter of the way through this Grand Prix. As Verstappen about 2 seconds clear out front. Norris still losing time to the two ahead of him, but he is pulling away from the cars behind him, and that is ultimately what matters most. As Leclerc is about 1.2 behind, and Russell in 5th is about 4 seconds behind Norris now. So Lando, compared to the cars behind, he's doing what he needs at the bare minimum. As Piastri, as they enter the final sector, has got the gap just under 2 seconds. As Norris and Leclerc enter the final sector. Alonso hasn't got any cars behind him now, so he's not trying to back the pack up. Isaac Hadjar, though, has got Ocon and Tsunoda and Lawson and Behrman all within, all having DRS. So Hadjar, I think, is going to come under a bit of pressure because he's dropped over 2 seconds away from the car ahead, which is Bortoletto, having a great weekend. Lap 13. And Lando still pulling away from Leclerc behind. As they come into this hairpin now. And we saw this in Qatar, very baffling pace from the Mercedes. Russell, he's 3 seconds behind Leclerc, really struggling compared to the Ferrari, and is actually got Alonso only a second and a half behind him, and he's closer to Alonso behind than he is to Leclerc ahead. This is not what we expected at all with Mercedes. So, like we saw in Qatar, where they were quite far off the pace, it's happening again. As here we are seeing Hadjar just ahead of Ocon as they come up to the end of the middle sector. Ocon not close enough, but Hadjar is starting to back up quite a few cars now. And as we've said before, the Racing Bulls, it's always very quick in qualifying, but in the races, it does tend to drop back a bit, especially on tracks where you can overtake to a degree. As lap 14, still all the same. Out front in the top 3 positions.
Piastri gained about 4/10 to Verstappen on that lap.
So what the gap's 1.5, 1.6, 1.6, yeah. So if he can keep that up, Piastri is going to be right in the fight for this race lead in 2 or 3 laps or so, as Ocon still within a second of Hadjar, as Pierre Gasly has pitted from 16th, which not quite sure about that. He was on the medium to start with. Not sure why he didn't drive or didn't go longer. As Lawson has been given a 5-second time penalty for driving erratically, so it must have been pretty poor piece of driving because we've not seen it. Whatever he did.
Yeah.
But down the bottom, Hamilton, Hulkenberg, Albon, and Gasly have all pitted, and all those drivers are going to be quite a bit quicker than most of the field at the minute because they've already made their pit stop. As George Russell told to pit, early pit stop for Mercedes, and also Isaac Hadjar into the pits. That's not really a surprise from him because he was falling back. But Russell is going to drop right back, and he's going to come out think only one position ahead of Lewis Hamilton. As also Oliver Behrman has made a pit stop. So Behrman is down in 19th. You've got Hadjar in 18th place. And then Russell has come out in 14th, just ahead of Lewis Hamilton. So Russell onto the hard tyres. So what Mercedes are doing is going for the earlier pit stop, and presumably they're going to try and get to the end of the race, because the hard tyres can go about 42 laps, we think, at most. And we've got about 43, 44 laps, I think, until the end. So I think that's what Mercedes are trying to do. As McLaren did come out in the pits for a pit stop, but they've gone back in. So clearly it was a dummy. As Bortoletto is pitting from 6th place. I will, by the way, correct the tyres in a moment. Everyone basically going onto the hard compound tyre. Bortoletto should come out in... he might come out behind Lewis Hamilton here, and only just ahead of his teammate. Let's see. And he actually comes out behind his teammate, so he's really lost out as Bortoletto. Down in what is now 15th, because Franco Colapinto in the other Alpine has pitted. So most people now on the hard compound tyre, actually everyone outside, or everyone from 10th place down, is on the hard compound tyre. As Lance Stroll, I think, has just overtaken Carlos Sainz, who was on the medium, as Alonso has been told to pit. And here comes Lando Norris, covering off the pit stop from George Russell on lap 17. As Leclerc also pits. And Tsunoda stays out. And that's where... That right there is where Red Bull start to rub their hands. Because now Tsunoda, presumably, will play the game. But Norris has come out just behind Antonelli, who obviously hasn't pitted yet. So let me just update that Alonso is in 14th. So Alonso's lost position to Hamilton and Hulkenberg. And then you've got Leclerc in 10th. And Lando Norris in 9th place. As out front, Verstappen still leading on the medium, Piastri second. The gap still about 1.6, 1.7 seconds. As now, this is where it gets really difficult for Norris, because now he's got to get his way through these cars, but also one of those cars is Yuki Tsunoda. And also another is Liam Lawson, who, of course, will be told surely to hold up Lando Norris. One thing that is not
helping. I was about to remind you of that.
Yeah. One thing that isn't helping Norris, though, is he's stuck behind Antonelli, who's within a second of Sainz. So it's going to make it a bit harder for Lando to overtake, even though he should still overtake. He's on much quicker tyres and faster car. As Lando dives to the inside of the hairpin and gets the move done. But will Antonelli come back on the exit? Let's see. Gets right in the slipstream, Antonelli. DRS. They both got DRS. And Antonelli has a look, but he's not going to take a massive risk. So Norris is up to 8th place as Norris gets a brilliant exit and now will overtake Carlos Sainz. It's just ahead of that. Liam Lawson and Lance Stroll are going side by side. And Lawson is under threat from Stroll and he's just about kept ahead. And this
All I'm going to say is that Sainz left the door wide open there for Norris. he had a bit of a mistake there in the chicane.
Yeah, he comfortably let that go, as this is going to get really difficult now for Lando because he's now stuck behind Stroll and Lawson, but they're in their own battle and Stroll will have DRS from Lawson, so Norris is going to have to navigate his way carefully through these two. As Carlos Sainz has pitted and has come out all the way down in 18th place. As Lando Norris, side by side with Stroll down the back straight. And Shawley gets the move done and goes down the inside. And Lawson as well. Brilliant double overtake. He needed to do that. And he's cleared a potential bit of danger there. But now the next car for him to clear is 4 seconds up the road, and it is Max Verstappen's teammate. As Lawson comes back at Norris, round the outside, will Lawson keep it? No, he won't. Norris gets it back. That is crucial for Lando's race. Lawson nearly went back round the outside of Lando on lap 20 as Verstappen and Piastri still out there in first and second place. But let me just update who's on what tyre compound. As the only medium tyre runners we've got is, Ocon now pits. The only medium tyre runners we've got out there, I think, is Verstappen and Lawson. As here's a replay of Leclerc further back, overtaking Antonelli, I think. So I'll update in a moment that he is up to, I think, 7th now that Ocon is pitted. As now here is Leclerc passing Stroll. And Ocon has pitted. Good stint there for Ocon. Gone 20 laps. And he's up. Well, he's back down. He's behind Behrman, but he's on quite a bit fresher tyres. So watch out for Ocon. As cars all over the place, and it's because we've got quite a lot of cars who either pitted really early or haven't pitted yet. So, yeah, Liam Lawson is now 5th with a train of cars behind him. Obviously, Lawson on the medium tyre. But everyone is on the hard tyre except for Max Verstappen in the lead and Liam Lawson, who surely Lawson is going to pit very soon. He's got a 5-second penalty to serve, as well as Leclerc has already passed him and is up to P5 as we're on lap 21. We're nearly halfway through this race, just like that. As Lando Norris is catching Yuki Tsunoda ahead. And Tsunoda, he might have been dropped by Red Bull, but he will get a very big special thank you from the team if he can somehow ruin Norris's race to the point of winning Max the championship. As Lance Stroll has overtaken Lawson. Lawson surely has got to pit at the end of this lap. He's got 0 pace.
Well, Tsunoda told all you can do when he catches. So, potential fireworks.
As he's only a couple seconds behind now as Russell. Brilliant move. He's gone round the outside of both Lawson and Stroll into the final sector. And Russell up to 6th. So there
Brilliant move.
you go. He's cleared his way through a lot quicker as Lawson now down to... Now he's pitting, finally. As we're on lap 22, Lawson will go on to a set of hard tyres. He's probably going to drop to the very back of the field, Lawson, because he had 0 pace in those final few laps. So the current order on lap 22, Verstappen in the lead on the medium, Piastri second, Tsunoda third, has not pitted. Obviously the top 2 haven't pitted either. Norris 4th, has pitted. Leclerc 5th, has pitted. Russell 6th, has pitted. Stroll 7th, has not pitted. Antonelli 8th, has not pitted. Hamilton 9th, has pitted. And Hülkenberg 10th, has pitted. Hülkenberg still has the fastest lap. And then you got Alonso 11th, Bortoletto 12th, Albon, Hadjar, Behrman, Ocon, Sainz, Gasly, Colapinto, and Lawson. Lap 23, we're now on. And here we go. What can Tsunoda do? Can he do as good of a job as what Perez did in 2021? As they now start lap 23. Norris only about half a second behind Tsunoda. Tsunoda has been told that Leclerc is only a second and a half behind Norris, so he knows what he needs to do. Back him up into Leclerc so Leclerc can find his way past if possible. They come into the hairpin. Norris gets a very good exit. Tsunoda's going to have to do something quite special here. As Norris, full power turned up, moves to the inside. Did he go off the track there? I'm not sure. He might have. But he gets past. I do wonder if he went over the white line there, though.
He 100% did, Chaz.
So he will have to give that position back. But, of course, if Leclerc very quickly passes Tsunoda, then Norris might be in a bit of trouble there. So, lap 24, Max Verstappen pits and finally gets rid of those medium tyres. He will come out ahead of Lando Norris, so he doesn't have to worry about being jumped by Norris. So, yeah, that's all good for Verstappen, who will be in second. And now everyone is on the hard tyres. Obviously, not everyone has pitted yet. As Oscar being told, okay, you got clear air. Let's see how this tyre recovers. And here's a replay from on board Lando Norris. Let's see, did he go over the white line? Got in the slipstream. DRS. And yeah, he did. I mean, we couldn't obviously see the rear tyre there.
It's been noted by race control.
There you go. His rear tyres were also clearly over as well. And, I mean, Red Bull would have been straight on the radio or, notifying the FIA that he violated the track limits there. So we'll see what they do. Tsunoda is now behind Leclerc, so it's not like they can just give the position back. So this could very well result in a 5-second time penalty for Lando Norris. As we're now on lap 25 of 58. And yeah, we will see as Oscar Piastri in the lead, hasn't pitted. He's 18.7 seconds clear of Verstappen. Obviously, if Piastri pits, he will come out in second. Presumably, they will pit Piastri. Well, they'll probably just wait as long as possible, because even if he comes out behind Norris, it doesn't really matter, because he needs Norris to finish a lot lower to have a chance. But that's what we need to look out for now, is will Lando Norris get a penalty? And hopefully we'll find out soon enough, as Oliver Behrman has just passed Isaac Hadjar, and Ocon has passed Behrman. Ocon's quickly on the move, as is a replay of Leclerc, how he passed Tsunoda, and yeah, just easily blasting past with DRS. As Ocon already up to 13th. As we've got Alonso 10th. Bortoletto has passed his teammate up to 11th. As Tsunoda and Norris incident noted, it says forcing another driver off the track. So I'm not sure if they're investigating both. Norris going all four wheels over, or right? Because I thought they had changed their minds on what they were investigating there. But hopefully we'll get a decision soon, as Charles Leclerc has done the fastest lap and is only a couple seconds behind. And yet, there you go, under investigation, Norris and Tsunoda incident, leaving the track and gaining an advantage. I can only see him getting a 5-second penalty.
Because, clear as day.
Yeah, and then at that point, what it comes down to is, can he build a 5-second lead to whoever's in fourth? At the moment, Leclerc behind him is catching him and is only a couple seconds behind. So we could be in a position at the moment, or in a moment, where Max Verstappen could be just 30 laps or so away from winning this World Championship. As on lap 27, Piastri still out in the lead. Piastri, I'm pretty confident, is just going to go as long as possible. Because if he pitted now, I think he would only come out just ahead of Norris.
Yeah.
And if they were going to cover Norris off, they would have done it by now. So yeah, Piastri is probably going to go another 15 laps at least. But yeah, that's what we're waiting for, is the decision here on whether Norris is going to get a penalty. As Charles Leclerc, fastest lap, 1:28.0. Leclerc, what a race he's having. He's been really, I think, driver of the race so far. I don't know how he's even anywhere near the top 3 in that car, but this is why we say he's one of the best out there. As we're looking at Max Verstappen, who is catching Piastri, but not by a massive amount. He doesn't really need to catch him by a massive amount. He just needs to manage his tyres and make sure that he catches enough. As Antonelli has now dropped to 10th. Antonelli hasn't pitted yet. As Leclerc being told, this pace is mega, well done. And it is. He's catching Lando Norris. And it's not because Leclerc's on fresher tyres. They pitted on the same lap. So, yeah. Stunning. Stunning pace. As a bit further back, Russell is shaping up to overtake Tsunoda for 5th, which will happen probably in the next half a lap or so. As Lando Norris responds to Leclerc's pace, does a fastest lap of 1:27.9. And here's a replay of Alonso passing Antonelli. Going Well, he almost went all four wheels over there. I think he might have just kept within the track limits, but it was very, very close.
Well, it was close. His left rear might have been over the white line still, or on the white line, but yeah, that was close.
As Russell is, I think, just about now overtaking Tsunoda. Is he? No. He's trying to go round the outside into that long left-hander, but he didn't get it done, so he's going to have to wait another lap or so. As we're on lap 29, we are halfway through this title decider, and we have drama potentially developing. Lando Norris might be given a time penalty any time now. We'll see. And that could very well decide whether he wins this World Championship. As Lando is pushing as hard as he can. He's not going, he's not managing too much. He is actually catching Verstappen ahead. But Leclerc is also keeping up nicely. So it's just Leclerc being so quick, which is forcing Lando to push so hard. As Russell, still quite far back from Tsunoda, into the chicane. As Ocon, as is racing Hulkenberg. They're side by side a bit further back. As Russell up to 5th. And Yuki Tsunoda has been given a 5-second time penalty for more than one change of direction. But Lando Norris, it still shows him as being under investigation.
Oh my goodness gracious me. No further action.
Yeah, that is extremely, that's controversial right there, because we clearly saw that Norris went all four wheels over the white line to overtake Tsunoda. Yes, Tsunoda probably did change direction probably too many times, but that doesn't mean that Lando had to go to where he did on the track to overtake Tsunoda. So, yeah, that's controversial. Very controversial. And as far as I'm concerned, he should have got a 5-second time penalty there, because that was a pretty clear case of overtaking off the racetrack. But there you go. Red Bull are going to be absolutely fuming at that. As we are now on lap 31 out of 58. As lower down the order, Bortoleto is just going round the outside of Antonelli. Great move. And Bortoleto up into the top 10. And is right behind Alonso, who is, of course, his manager. So, still looking good for Bortoleto, because remember, Hamilton, Tsunoda, Stroll, the three of the, 9 cars ahead of him haven't, Hamilton has pitted, but surely will pit again. And Stroll and Tsunoda, we know, haven't pitted. And Tsunoda, of course, has got a 5-second penalty. So, Bortoleto has still got a pretty good chance of finishing in the top 7 of this race, which would be a great result. As Oscar Piastri, obviously still out front. The gap now 12.7 between him and Verstappen. If Piastri pitted now, then Verstappen would be about 9 point whatever seconds in the lead. well, not in the lead, but ahead of Piastri. Norris would go up to second.
Piastri would come out behind Leclerc, or at least very, very close with him.
Yeah. As we're on lap 32, Max Verstappen has done the fastest lap of the race, as Tsunoda questioning what penalty. And they're telling him it's for moving twice down the straight to defend. It'll, sure be debated, as Lewis Hamilton has indeed pitted again. So he'll presumably gone to another... No, it's going to be a set of medium tyres. So Lewis Hamilton is going to presumably finish the race on that set. Yeah, there'll be a lot of talk after this race about whether Norris should have got a penalty. And I think most people are going to say he should have and would be right with that. But I think one thing we need to remember is even if he got a penalty, doesn't mean that he would have lost the championship, because I think McLaren probably still would have engineered Piastri to somehow help Lando.
Well, they have. They've had Norris undercut Piastri with the different strategy. So
yeah. So even if Lando had a 5-second penalty, they'd still find a way to get Lando onto the podium with McLaren. So I don't think ultimately it's going to cost him.
I just can't believe that, because changing direction once, it also isn't forcing a driver off the track, and Tsunoda didn't do that. Norris has just driven off the track and overtaken him off the track.
Exactly. Lando didn't have to go that way to overtake him. He could have gone the other way.
He almost did Vietnam flashbacks to bloody Canada.
Yeah, it was quite an aggressive move to that part of the track when he could have easily just stayed on the racing line. But
he nearly remembered who he was.
As who's pitting? Yuki Tsunoda has finally pitted, and Antonelli has finally pitted. Antonelli's had a miserable weekend, so let's see what he can do now. As is a replay of Ocon, who I think overtook Antonelli right before Antonelli pitted. As the Haas's and the Saubers having a right ding-dong in this race. So, Antonelli is actually now last of all. Tsunoda is in 18th. And then Lewis Hamilton is 17th. On lap 34. Only about 25 laps to go in 2025. And as it stands, Lando Norris will be the world champion of 2025. All he needs to do is stay where he is, and he is champion. And that's pretty much what McLaren are doing. It's just making sure he just stays secure as he is. As, Hamilton, Tsunoda, and Antonelli have all gone onto a set of medium compound tyres. Piastri, if he goes long enough, Piastri might be able to go onto a set of soft tyres. Pirelli did say that was an option for the end of the race. As Alex Albon has pitted. Albon was another driver like Lewis Hamilton who pitted very early. As McLaren getting ready for a pit stop. And who is it going to be? Surely not Lando Norris. And no, Piastri has gone through. So it looks like they're very soon they're going to bring Piastri in. As Albon has dropped to last place. So we'll just update the tyre situation down there. As Verstappen is still going to comfortably win this race, but he's going to need something miraculous to happen to Lando Norris for him to win his 5th World Championship. As Leclerc has really dropped off the pace now compared to Norris. Leclerc nearly 5 seconds behind Norris. Russell in 5th is 14.5 seconds behind Leclerc, never mind Norris. Mercedes are, just baffled as to why they're so slow. Russell, he's easily quick enough to finish ahead of the midfield runners, but he's nowhere near McLaren, Red Bull, and Ferrari. As we're on lap 36, Piastri still goes round as Lewis Hamilton has made his way up to 15th. Keep your eye on Hamilton. If everyone in that midfield stays out until the end, Lewis Hamilton is going to finish in the points because he's going to have a lot more pace on those mediums. He's not that far away from P10, which is Oliver Behrman. Behrman is 7 or 8 seconds up the road from Hamilton. So, Hamilton looking good to score at least a point in his final race of the season.
Well, we're really just waiting for Piastri to pit and then for the fun to begin.
Indeed, as is a replay of Lewis Hamilton. Just getting a much better exit than Colapinto from the hairpin. And then easily overtaking. And yeah, Ferrari have been a lot quicker in this race than I think a lot of people expected. And that's, to a degree, helping Lewis Hamilton. As Albon has been noted for speeding in the pit lane. He's ending his season absolutely terribly. He's in horrible form in these last few races. Still had a great season. We have to remember that. But compared to Carlos Sainz, he's gone the complete other direction. As on lap 37, the pit window for the hard tyre opens in a couple laps. As we're looking at Lando Norris, who's only a few seconds behind Verstappen. And as Nib said, we're just waiting for Piastri to pit so we can get some actual overtaking, especially up towards the front part of the field. As Lewis Hamilton has made another overtake. He's overtaken Pierre Gasly and is only about 1.5 seconds behind Hadjar, who has just been overtaken by Carlos Sainz. So, yeah, Hamilton is going to quickly make his way through here as Piastri goes through again, begins lap 38. So we're about 20 laps away from the finish. And McLaren's still ready for when they need to be called into the pits. As Tsunoda is now ahead of Colapinto. As Max Verstappen is 6 seconds clear of Lando Norris, if you're wondering. So once Piastri pits, Max still has a comfortable lead that he'll easily maintain to the finish. As further down, we've got a good fight. Ocon and Bortoletto and Behrman fighting over 8th ninth, and 10th, and actually fighting Alonso for 7th as well. As Ocon has got a good exit from the hairpin and is right in the slipstream. Forces Bortoleto to defend to the inside. And does he get past? Yes, he does. Round the outside. Brilliant move by Esteban Ocon, having a very good final race of the year.
Can they pit up Piastri already?
Yeah, it has got very boring these last few laps as Bortoleto tried to get past Ocon, or back past, and he did briefly, but Ocon made sure to keep it. So Ocon is now up to 8th, as Behrman is now right behind Bortoleto 10th. Haas heading, by the looks of it, for a potential 7th and 8th place finish if Behrman can get past Bortoleto. Remember, Stroll in 6th, hasn't pitted yet. So in the midfield, by the looks of it, it looks like it's going to finish Alonso probably... Well, will it finish Alonso 6th? We'll have to see. Lewis Hamilton is very quickly making his way through the field. It might end up Lewis Hamilton finishing in 6th, and then Alonso, Ocon, Behrman, Bortoleto, as we've just seen a replay of Hamilton passing Hadjar for 13th, and Hamilton is not far from the points now. Only another, I think, 4 or 5 seconds away. And here's a replay of how Ocon passed Bortoleto, and brilliant move round the outside. As Max Verstappen now does the fastest lap of 1:27.6, and he's now only a second and a half behind Piastri. As Leclerc pits for the second time, and you know what? Why not? Because Russell in 5th is almost a pit stop behind. He will come out behind Russell, but if they want to somehow get the podium, why not?
Interesting.
As Tsunoda passes Pierre Gasly for 15th. Piastri still about 1.2 clear. As, yeah, Leclerc has come out about 2.5 seconds behind Russell, but he should very quickly pass Russell. Russell has got 0 pace compared to...
Yep, and they're telling Norris to box because they're just going to cover off what Leclerc has done. But I believe they've only got a set of hards for him.
And yeah, Norris is just coming through the penultimate corner now as Piastri and Verstappen go through to begin lap 41. And Norris indeed does pit. And Norris should come out in 3rd. And there you go. So, all good there. And yeah, he'll come out probably about 5 seconds ahead of Russell. Here comes Max Verstappen. Will he overtake Piastri on track? Piastri is not going to defend. Max Verstappen takes the lead of the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix. He's going to win this race. But at this point, I'm not sure he's going to win the championship. Leclerc is on the medium compound tyre, so Leclerc has got the softer tyre, but we've seen the harder tyre has been the better tyre in this race. So let me just update that. Yeah, Leclerc is on the medium, and then down the order, we've got Tsunoda in 15th on the medium, as Piastri finally makes his pit stop, and he will come out in 2nd place. As Gasly and Colapinto have pitted.
And this is the thing now, is that McLaren have snookered Verstappen. Verstappen can't back up Piastri because Piastri, with that tyre advantage, would overtake Verstappen.
Yeah, as I think Leclerc is about to pass Russell. As Verstappen, as you say, he can't cover that off. As after Piastri's pit stop, Max is now 24.5 seconds in the lead. So Max should be fine to go to the end, but like you say, can't really pit again as Leclerc easily up the inside of Russell, and Leclerc is in fourth. Leclerc still nearly 6 seconds behind Norris, though. So the gamble not quite going to pay off for Leclerc, but at least they can push on for these final few laps of the race. As we're now lap 43. Only about 15 laps to go. As Behrman is now ahead of Bortoletto. So 8th and 9th for the two horses. Lewis Hamilton has passed Sainz and Hulkenberg. And Hamilton is only half a second behind Bortoletto. So yeah, Hamilton, he's going to finish probably 6th in this race. The Ferrari easily quick enough.
Dear.
As Antonelli is up to 16th. That's partly because the Alpines have pitted. As this is a replay of Hamilton overtaking Hulkenberg, I think it is. Round the outside, down the second DRS zone. And yeah, he looks way quicker than those cars around him. And he is up to P10 because Lance Stroll has finally pitted. Hulkenberg has also made a pit stop. So Hulkenberg is now 18th. Stroll is 17th. And then you've got Albon 16th, Lawson 15th, Antonelli 14th, Tsunoda 13th. As we're on lap 44. As Max being told that Piastri's going to need to be 1.5 seconds a lap quicker than you to overtake. And yeah, there's no way that's going to happen.
Well, it's funny. Then Max did a 17.4 first sector, which is purple by at least 0.2.
As we've got very close running, I have to say, in the midfield. Alonso in 6th, only a second ahead of Ocon. And then Behrman just behind Ocon. Very important positions there because remember, Haas are only 7 points behind Aston Martin. So if Haas can finish pretty much where they are now and Alonso finishes 9th or even lower, then Haas might be able to overtake Aston Martin in the championship. It's still a lot to be fought for in that midfield, especially for Haas. Vital positions for them. As Lewis Hamilton is past Bortoletto and is up to 9th, and he's now right on the back of Oliver Behrman. As Lance Stroll has just passed Liam Lawson. So let me just update that. Well, Hamilton is going to pass Oliver Behrman in a moment. And then we've got Tsunoda, who's just overtaken Hadjar. Tsunoda's another one to look out for. He could be right there in the top 10 at the end. As the on the broadcast, we're looking at Lando Norris in a very comfortable, lonely third place, and that's all he needs to become champion. He is less than 15 laps away from winning his first World Championship.
Try not to vomit challenge. Impossible.
As most people now outside of the top 10 are on the medium compound tyre. And obviously they're drivers who have pitted a bit later. So keep an eye out for all of them, because we've seen there in the past in the midfield last lap overtakes on much fresher tyres, as Hamilton is now past Behrman. And Behrman actually gets back past Hamilton. And does he keep it? No, he does not. Lewis Hamilton retakes position. So Hamilton up to 8th and is only a couple seconds behind Ocon, who is right behind by only 6/10. Right behind Alonso. As we're looking here at Leclerc. And they're just showing on the screen that if Max pitted now, he would come out about a second ahead of Piastri, but there's no way Red Bull are going to pit. They don't need to. As Pierre Gasly, 5-second penalty for track limits. And really, we need to be looking at the midfield, because that's where all the action looks to be going on. But we're busy looking at Leclerc on his own in 4th. Leclerc is catching Norris, but not by enough to overtake Norris before the end, as the gap, lap 47, is about 4 seconds between Norris and Leclerc. And yeah, Leclerc would have to catch it probably 3-4 tenths at least a lap to have a chance at the end of overtaking. As Hulkenberg just in a purple middle sector. I think that's because he's had DRS, because he's just overtaken Liam Lawson. Is out front. Verstappen just under 21 seconds clear of Piastri, heading comfortably for victory. Max asking, is Charles catching or not? And he's being told that, yeah, catching, but not quick enough. As interestingly, Lewis Hamilton got up to 8th, but his progress has stalled. He's not catching Alonso and Ocon anymore, like he was earlier. So I don't know if he's got his tyres a bit dirty and he's, needing to clean them up or whatever. But yeah, his pace has dropped off for a lap or so, as Lance Stroll is up to now 15th. Antonelli is about to overtake Hadjar, and does, for 13th. Antonelli's another one who's going to be right there fighting for the top 10 at the end of this race. Sad race for Hadjar. Started 9th, was up in 8th after the first few laps, and he looks like he's going to finish down in 15th, 16th place. Racing Bulls have just had no race pace, unfortunately. As The gap between Norris and Leclerc is still about just over 4 seconds. Here's a replay of Antonelli passing Hadjar round the outside into the left-hander. And simple as round the outside on fresher tyres, faster car. So lap 49, 10 laps to go. Piastri still catching, but I think Oscar knows himself he's not going to catch Verstappen, as Hamilton is now catching up to Ocon and Alonso. He's just a second behind, now under a second behind Ocon, as Ocon is still under a second behind Alonso. That midfield, from Alonso in 6th down to Antonelli in 13th, you've only got 7 or 8 seconds covering those cars. So it's going to be very close for the final few points paying positions. As Lance Stroll is about to overtake Hadjar probably the next half a lap or so. As Ocon has now dropped over a second behind Alonso. Hamilton keeping himself within a second. So Hamilton should really get after Ocon now, as we're still looking at the, well, most boring part of the race, which is what's going on up front, really. Because it's pretty much all decided at this point. Verstappen is going to win. Piastri is going to finish in 2nd. And Norris will finish in 3rd, which is enough for him, as Stroll overtakes Hadjar for 14th. As we're now on lap 50 of 58. Just a reminder, guys, make sure to stick around after the Grand Prix is finished, because I want to hear from you guys once the race is finished. And I want to know who your driver of the day is for this Abu Dhabi Grand Prix. But, yeah, the most interesting fight really is from 6th down to about 11th place. Rather than what's going on up front. As well, Verstappen. We forgot to talk about it, haven't we, Nib? Max backing the pack up. He hasn't tried it once in this race. Does he try it now?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure. At this stage, I don't think he will, because I think, well, I mean, although I've got to say the pace difference between the McLarens and him is about 8/10 to 9/10 a lap. What they really should have done with Verstappen is take the free pit stop when Piastri pitted.
Yeah.
Put him on new tyres, and then they could have tried to back the pack up. That would have been the way, but yeah, that opportunity has sailed past now.
Yeah. As still, Hamilton stuck behind Ocon, who's got back within a second of Alonso. As Hulkenberg has just passed Albon for 16th place. And really, that's what we should be watching in this race, is the progress of Lewis Hamilton through the pack, because it's been the most interesting thing in the last 10-15 laps, as is a replay of Hulkenberg passing Albon with DRS. And remember, guys, we're just over 5 laps to go. This is the final few laps of the drag production system in Formula 1. Who will be the final DRS overtake? We will find out. The first ever DRS overtake, I believe, was Fernando Alonso on Nico Rosberg in Melbourne in 2011. It is unlikely that Alonso will also be the last overtake with DRS, but you never know. I was hoping it would kind of be that way, but Alonso is the one right now who was wishing it would be, he's wishing that DRS didn't exist right now as Hulkenberg passes Hadjar. Lewis Hamilton right on the back of Ocon still. But still can't get past. I wish, again, we could see that battle, but they're not going to show any of it because all they care about is the top three. So, yeah, we'll have to, unfortunately, stare at the McLarens doing absolutely fuck all. But if Hamilton does get past Ocon, I will let you guys know because they are still really closely fighting out there in these final few laps. As Hamilton actually now, they're showing, sends it down the inside of Ocon at the chicane. Does he get the move done? Yes, he does. Ambitious move, and Lewis Hamilton on lap 53 is up to 7th place. But Ocon gets him back into the left-hander. Obviously, you get DRS the next time round, so Ocon gets him back. Good racing between Ocon and Hamilton. As Lance Stroll is very quickly moving through the field. He's overtaken Antonelli and Tsunoda in the last 2 or 3 laps. And Stroll is only about 2.5 seconds away from a point. So Lance Stroll might nick a point at the very end of this race. Remember, Stroll went the longest of anyone before pitting, I think, or one of the longest. And is incredibly quick out there. As now lap 54, 5 laps remain. And if you're wondering, with the DRS system, it will be replaced next year by basically a push to pass. The drivers will have to use the electrical boost, basically, from the power unit to overtake, and it will still be the same rules. You only be able to use it within a second of the car ahead. And then obviously you've got the active aero as well. So we'll see how it works next year, but might not be
hopefully better.
Yeah, hopefully better, but might not be too great. I've not heard great things, to be honest, but we'll see ultimately next year as Albon now passes Hadjar. Albon, though, still has a penalty that he hasn't served. As Lewis Hamilton still stuck about 6/7 of a second behind Ocon. As Ocon has dropped 2.5 seconds behind Alonso now. So Alonso looks like he's done enough just about to hold on to 6th place. Brilliant result for Alonso. Big winter coming up for Aston Martin. Who knows where they'll be in Melbourne in just 12 weeks' time. As we're looking at the 2 McLarens, Piastri and Norris. As low down the field, Stroll dives down the inside at Sainz into the chicane, but Sainz holds it around the outside. Stroll, though, will get a much better exit, switch back, fresher tyres, and he gets the move done. Sainz, though, will try to fight him back, but I'm pretty sure Stroll will hold it, and he does. So Stroll now 11th. And I think surely Stroll is going to overtake Bortoleto. which is a shame for Bortoleto. He's driven great this weekend, but it looks like he's going to miss out on a point. As Hulkenberg now passes Antonelli. Antonelli has had a complete horror show of a race. He's going to finish in about 15th place. Somehow finishing lower than he started. As lap 56. 3 laps remain. And Lando Norris is just 3 laps away from winning his first World Championship as Lance Stroll passes Bortoleto down the back straight, and he does get up to 10th. And Stroll will finish at least 10th, but there's still time. He's quick enough. He might be able to catch Behrman, but he's got 3.2 seconds to find. They have to push hard to get 9th place, as turn 8 incident with Stroll and Sainz has been noted. No idea what that is. As we're just looking at Oscar Piastri, who's still catching Verstappen. The gap about 13 seconds, but obviously we're so close to the end now. As Max Verstappen will begin the penultimate lap in a moment. And he does now. As Oscar Piastri comes through. He's about to lap an Alpine of, I think, Colapinto. And well, for Max Verstappen, he's going to end up just 2 points behind and losing the championship. And Max Verstappen will go down as one of the rare drivers to have won the most races in a season and not have won the championship. Max, if he wins this race, be 8 wins for the season. The other 2 McLaren drivers got 7 apiece. But ultimately, Lando looks like he's done just enough. As Verstappen is already into the heart of the final sector amongst some traffic. Stroll might actually pass Behrman on the final lap. He's really catching him very quickly. Only a second or 1.3 seconds behind as Max Verstappen begins the final tour of 2025. He's not going to win the championship, but we all know, regardless, that he is still by far the best. And if he was in that McLaren, well, the championship would have been over 3 months ago. But he's done pretty much all he can to win the championship, but it just wasn't to be. People will say, oh, but this race and that race, but can't expect perfection, I'm afraid. As Hulkenberg has got up to 12th and is right on the back of his teammate now. So Hulkenberg somehow is going to beat his teammate, Bortoleto. As Lando Norris, the champion-elect, has begun his final lap. He's halfway through the final lap as Max Verstappen coming round the final few corners. And who knows, in this next era coming up, this might be the final time we see him winning a race for Red Bull. You just never know what's going to happen in Formula One. As Max Verstappen will take yet another win in Abu Dhabi, but it will be a new driver winning his first world championship as Oscar Piastri will come home second. And in third, winning his first ever world championship, Lando Norris for McLaren. A new champion has been crowned. He has finished in third as the McLaren garage goes wild. And the rest of the top 10, Leclerc 4th, Russell 5th, Alonso 6th, Ocon 7th, Hamilton 8th, Behrman 9th, and Lance Stroll, I think, will just about finish behind in 10th. And then it will be Hulkenberg, Bortoletto. As no, Stroll has overtook Behrman on the final lap. So Stroll 9th, Behrman 10th, and then Hulkenberg, Bortoletto, Sainz, Tsunoda, Antonelli, Albon, Hadjar, Lawson, Gasly, and Colapinto, all 20 runners finishing the final race. And, well, no matter what you think of how his season went, at the end of the day, Lando Norris has won the World Championship, so congratulations to him. I will just quickly start up a poll asking you guys who is your driver of the day for this race. Obviously, I'm not going to ask you about Lando Norris because I know that you do not want to talk about him whatsoever. But from Verstappen and Piastri's point of views, they did the best they could today, didn't they? But it was out of their hands in terms of winning the championship. It was all down to whether Lando could take the podium, and he did. So, yeah, from your driver point of view, Oscar, he drove really well today, but just wasn't enough because of obviously what's happened in other races. What do you have to say about your man's race?
Yeah, did a decent job today. I mean, obviously the overtake on this imposter of a world champion was absolutely outrageous. The hard tyre probably wasn't the way to go, but I mean, it gave McLaren a strategical advantage for all facets that could potentially happen, and that played to their advantage. But yeah, no, Piastri drove as best he could today, and same for Verstappen. Not much Verstappen really could have done. Only maybe if Tsunoda had done an even better job of trying to keep Norris behind. What he really needed to do was back him up in the final sector, like Perez did. But yeah, I mean, with that mistake by Antonelli last week, it was always going to be very difficult for Verstappen to win the world championship, or for anyone to win the championship other than Lando Norris this weekend. And this is extremely woke with them having all the stuff on the grid, so there's no donuts and burnouts.
Well, he's doing burnouts and donuts anyway on the pit straight. But yeah, as you say, Max and Oscar, I thought drove as well as they could today. But as you say, because Antonelli made that mistake in Qatar, Lando, it simplified what he needed to do for this race. If Antonelli had stayed ahead in those final laps, then if this result had happened today, Max would be world champion by I'll be on count back of race wins. So that's ultimately, if you want to look at one moment in these final couple races that decided it, it was that. But again, by no means did Antonelli let Norris through. That is just complete rubbish that some people have thrown out there. Antonelli, the reason he lost the position was because his tyres were absolutely finished in that particular race. What do you call it? Who would you go for as your driver of the day then for that race? A pretty boring race, to be honest.
Shocking race. I mean, Leclerc, Hamilton. I'm not sure. I
I
think both Ferrari drivers were pretty good, weren't they?
Yeah, I don't know why I didn't put Leclerc in the driver of the day vote, to be honest, but yeah, both Ferrari drivers did pretty well. Max was very good, Oscar as well. As much as, pains me to say, Lance Stroll had a pretty good race for once, coming from 15th to 9th place. But there wasn't an absolute like number one standout. So yeah, we'll see what we got, what you guys vote for in the chat. By the way, thank you guys so much for tuning into this stream. We've had a lot of viewers on stream today. Thank you very much for that, and thank you all for smashing the like button. If you haven't smashed the like button, make sure to do so. We are only 12 likes away from 200 likes. So make sure you smash that like button so we can get up to 200 likes. And yeah, I'll just leave that poll running for another moment or so. Obviously, we haven't got enough time to talk about the championship battle and, how it's all gone this season. But overall, in terms of 2025 as a neutral, not the greatest season. Definitely not as exciting as last season. We ended up getting a 3-way decider. Something that we hoped for at the start of the year, but it didn't look like we were actually going to get until probably a couple of weeks ago when it actually looked like a slight possibility. Yeah, what are your thoughts on the season we've had? For me, it's been probably I wouldn't say an average season, but nowhere near as good as what we've had in recent years. Probably 6 out of 10, honestly, at best. What are your thoughts of the season we've had in terms of excitement?
As the worst season sports ever had.
One thing I have to say is, and I've seen so many people say this online, and it is true, these ground effect cars have been absolutely awful, quite
And I
frankly.
wholeheartedly blame Toto Wolff for that.
Yeah. He did ruin these cars by forcing the FIA to introduce that technical directive halfway through 2022, and it ruined these cars quite a bit. Who knows, the type of racing we would have got after that. But yeah. But yeah, I'm pleased to see the back of these cars because they just didn't do it for me. And as well, one thing, I mean, next season the cars will be lighter and smaller, not by a lot, but at least we're moving in the right direction. I really hope we don't ever go back to having bigger, heavier cars and only go, back to having smaller cars, as small as we can. Obviously, it's not going to be back to how it was 20, 30 years ago, but these cars just weren't good enough, really, for racing. What we've had in previous eras. Also, the tires, I mean, especially this season, absolutely rubbish. Pirelli, I really hope lose the tire contract in a couple years because I'm just done with them. And their tires that last forever. So yeah, hopefully we'll get some improvements with the on-track product not just next season, but in the next new era we've got coming up in 2026, where basically everything is reset in Formula One. And we'll see who will be the world champion next year. Will it be Lando Norris and Piastri fighting for the championship again at McLaren? Will Mercedes be in there? Alonso and the Aston Martin? Will Ferrari have a resurgence? Will Red Bull still provide a good enough car for Max Verstappen to fight for the championship? Who knows what next season could bring? But we will find out once we get to Melbourne in a few weeks' time. But guys, thank you so much for coming along for this stream. been great to have you all along and have so many of you tune in as well. Thank you for the member that joined the channel. That's very cool. And yeah, just thank you guys so much for tuning in for the stream this weekend and obviously throughout the season. Nib, and by the way, thank you to Say Regards, just donated $2. Says Merry Christmas. Thank you very much for that. Nib, obviously, thank you so much for joining me over the course of the year for all the streams we've done together since I think the first one was back in March for I think the Chinese Grand Prix all the way to now. And yeah, cheers for helping out and coming along, and we'll see you again probably. I'd imagine probably end of pre-season testing or during the first Grand Prix or something like that.
Yeah, you definitely will, because I won't be attending the Grand Prix, I don't think, this year. But I'm not sure whether or not I'll be doing something on the day for it or not as of yet. But yeah, I'm sure we can come and chit-chat for several hours during pre-season testing. That would be lovely, as we like to do. But yeah, thanks everyone for the continued support of the channel. All the regulars, you know who you are, because then I'll miss out on someone. Hopefully I will be in a bit more of a cheerful mood when it comes to February next year, although it will be absolutely haunting to see a number one on a McLaren car with a yellow helmet driving it. That makes me sick. But yeah, I hope you all guys have a great new year, a great happy holidays, as we like to say, and yeah, we'll see you later. And of course, sorry, I should say, big thanks to Chaz. He's the man. We'll see you next year.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. And yeah, I did actually forget about that whole number one number thing with Lando. So yeah, that's not a great sight to imagine, to be honest, going into next year. But yeah, cheers for like I said, coming on to the streams, and thanks for the compliments there. And as he said, thank you to all the regulars who have come along this year, to all the streams, all of the content from when we started in, what was it, like middle of February for pre-season testing, all the way until now, as we're only 2.5 weeks before Christmas. Thank you guys so much for all the likes, all of it, donations, all of that. Very much appreciated. Just a quick update. I will obviously be uploading my podcast tomorrow to quickly just go over what happened in this Grand Prix, a reflection basically on this final Grand Prix. And then remember, there will be 4 videos coming out on the channel between tomorrow's podcast and Christmas. 2 of those videos will be a driver rankings video. We'll also be doing a video about how the championship was won and looking at the real reasons why Lando Norris has ended up winning the championship, and also doing a video about Kimi Antonelli. And then there'll be loads more videos in January and early February for the winter break. And then we'll be getting into obviously pre-season testing and all of that stuff. So make sure to check out all of that content. And just obviously, because this is my final live stream of the year, just to let you guys know, my next live stream will be on Friday, January the 30th. That is the final day of the shakedown test in Barcelona for the 2026 cars. So that will be my next live stream, Friday, January 30th, 2026. Make sure to join me as we'll start to look at the 2026 cars and the 2026 Formula One season, where we have a complete reset of the regulations. Before I go, make sure to smash the like button. As usual, helps the channel and the algorithm and all of that stuff. Make sure as well to subscribe to the channel for all that content coming up, and for all the watch-alongs and great stuff we're going to do next season. Another thing as well, I do have a donation page in my description. It's called Buy Me a Coffee. Make sure, and I'm sure Rooks, he'll post a link of it in the chat. Make sure to go to that page if you want to donate an amount, to support the channel or to say thanks or whatever. It can be a one-time amount, a monthly amount. It can be whatever amount you want. You can even put a message with your donation as well. It's your choice. But yeah, if you want to donate, then there you go. And yeah, it's just posted it in the chat. So there you go. So yeah, until my podcast tomorrow, reviewing what's happened here in Abu Dhabi. And until, obviously, all the content over the winter. And until that next live stream, Friday, January 30th, where we will kick off our look at 2026. It has been me, Kazza HD. Goodbye.